there.
Yeah.
Do you need to let me go? The cable. Hold it. Sorry.
All the documents. Distribute all the documents. Unscreen is that maybe.
It was so crazy, so funny. Sorry about that.
Excuse me, what's going on? Okay, is that you? You're gonna sit there? The presentation.
You know, actually, you guys, just so you know, it's a lot easier to get you when you're down towards that end of the table. This kind of, we start getting you guys blocking each other.
Interesting.
Like,
I wonder if I should sit there.
so these, like this chair and that chair are the best.
For the presentations?
For yes.
Huh. That's interesting.
Because I've seen it so many times where the person on this
That's
end
interesting.
here ends up blocking the person who's speaking for like, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, it's imperfect
It's interesting.
situation.
That's what we want, but we like to be flexible. Let's be flexible.
I mean, it's more for the people who are here.
Yeah, to be there temporarily.
Who's presenting? I thought Rankinson was.
I think he said he was.
He's going to come. If you're presenting.
I went down to see him.
Oh, yeah?
He wasn't there. So.
Oh, okay. Huh, interesting. That's funny. So I guess the presenters will be down there. That actually makes a lot of sense. Let's see if we can make that work.
I have to stand up the microphone.
No, you just need to use that last mic.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, if you're presenting, that allows you to actually, you could use this if you wanted to. If not, whoever's sitting next to you could do it.
Okay.
How goes that so far? So we're gonna try something a little different. I don't know if you've done a lot of meetings. Usually I'm down there, but she said actually the presenters. So I'm gonna slide down, and I'll just take this last mic. See how that works. Sure, whatever works. Good question. This is as far as it goes. She could probably be with us. Don't think this one will go. Oh, it does. Oh, we could even go one more down here if we wanted to. What the heck? Oh, what the heck? Even one more. Yeah, you get powered up here. Let's give more room to the presenters. Oh, yeah.
I guess so.
If I don't get here by the
Uh-huh.
time they start,
Yep.
be sure to remind the chair that the reason that we're having this down here is because we split out, we have a water lab. So
Right. Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I have a little less to show. Otherwise, I would have. Yeah, no, if you don't mind.
We'd like to have environmental review. So I don't know, I think we should get smart with the
Yeah.
Those are the eight.
What's the story here?
We're thinking. We're gonna mess things up.
You are.
Because she suggested that the presenters are best down there because they're most
So where should I
audible.
sit? Where would you like me
Your
to sit?
call. Where would you normally sit?
I
Over
usually
here?
sit by either Jane or Val.
Okay. Well, sit by me, please. I feel much better that way. Although, if you need to use the mic, maybe I should move down one.
Yeah, either way, just so there's not a space.
Yeah. Cool. Let's do that. And that way. Oops.
Now I know.
I may secretly be clicking on that.
Just know she's over your shoulder.
I know, I
Taking.
guess maybe that's not going to work.
Well, that is weird. Maybe we should get a. You need polarizing filters.
I know, it feels kind of intrusive. I know people have those screens.
Yeah.
This could come in handy.
It's not that very basic. No, we don't have one. Oh, yeah. Jim, Josh, what do you guys want to say? And Jonathan will come. Just Justin, right?
Yep. City.
Jonathan could sit here maybe. And Jim.
Do you ever have more than 3 presenters? Probably not. If you do, you can play musical chairs.
Well, we have a presenter and then they leave.
Right.
And we have
So,
another presenter.
yeah, musical chairs.
Usually
That
only
works.
one presenter.
One at a time. Let's see. So that is Jim Fleming.
Are they over in the chambers?
Uh-oh.
Look, I'm gonna go.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, I'm 6.
What if it was just by habit that they set us up here? I don't know.
I just can't move this laptop too far.
No comment.
Because you want to try it.
Election changes.
And Jonathan does it, so you got to. Yeah. And then we'll stay.
So if you lean right there, it's hard to read
Oh, really?
that.
Okay.
So, alright, well, yeah, I try to hide things from the public all the time. Never works, but it's worth a try. Get that on tape?
You have all this.
Okay, when people are in They were all waiting for us. They were? Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my.
We thought we were you first.
Oh, my goodness.
Happy to do it with you.
Wow, it was a big crowd.
Nothing like a surprise. Good evening, good
I went down
evening.
to see it. So the question is, how did all of you guys get the message we're here and none of us did?
They probably read the thing.
Oh, you read it. There you go.
Actually, I think I just assumed.
It's on the agenda.
You know, the reality of what happened is the AV folks came looking for the key to the closet and were setting up. That's how I knew we were here. Hello, how are you, Judith?
We were where we thought we were. Yeah.
Good to see you. Nice to meet you in person. Thank you.
I think we met before.
You know Garth? Yes.
Good to see you
Very
again.
good to see you. Thank you.
I think we bumped into each other in the halls of the city of San Jose.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What was the context there? Do you recall?
Well, I worked for the water district.
Oh, well, that'll do it. Thank you.
Okay, you ready to roll? Good to go?
Good to go.
All right, let's call this meeting of the UAC to order. Happy New Year, everybody. Let's start with roll call, and Steve, you want to start us off?
Steve Aglash here. Cook present.
We're sharing, I think.
Yes, we will need to share microphones.
Foster here.
You don't have to hit the button.
Oh, we don't.
Yeah, it should,
Always on.
they're all.
Always on, okay.
Valentine present?
Schwartz present.
All present.
Okay, oral communications, any cards, anyone? Okay. Next up is approval of the minutes. Did anyone have comments on the minutes? Nope. Motion to approve? What?
I think it says in the minutes that I said you were on the CA.
Wait, go ahead and, where do we have a mic?
That you can
Where's-
use the public microphone.
Oh, over there.
Hi, Herb Warwick. I believe that the minutes as written, my comments near the end of the meeting say that, mentioned that you, what I did say was that you were one of the persons who signed the committee, that the citizens, group from the Citizens Committee on Fiber had signed the letter to the council.
Right.
And I believe that's recorded in the minutes saying that you're on the committee. as
Ah,
opposed to
and
having
I'm not
signed it.
on the committee.
So you can find that spot. I don't have it.
Let's have a look here.
Yeah.
Is now on the committee, right, and that is not correct. I didn't catch that. Good catch. Let's see. So I think we should just delete that, because that is not, in fact, what you said and is not correct. So, Ed and Jane, if you look on page 7 of the minutes, it says, under public comment, the second sentence says as follows: he noted that the Citizens Committee has lost some of its members, and that Chair Foster is now on the committee. And that is not the case. So I would just delete the words, and that Chair Foster is now on the committee.
I move that we approve as amended.
All second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're good to go. All right, next up is agenda review and revisions. Ed and Jane, anything? Okay, Steve?
So I had one comment. Let's see. Commissioner Hall typically leaves these UAC meetings early before we address water issues to avoid conflicts with his job. And we usually have commissioner comments at the end of the agenda after all of the regular agenda items. I don't think there's any conflict issues associated with commissioner comments because there's no exchange, there's no discussion, even if there happened to be a commissioner comment related to water. So I wanted to suggest that we move commissioner comments up early enough in the agenda so that Commissioner Hall is still here.
Okay, let's do it. And, to be honest, why don't we just, Ed and Jane, as a kind of standing item going forward, let's just move commissioner comments, just because we'll have this anytime there's any commissioner comments. Okay, sounds good.
Move it up between.
And then we'll always move
room
commissioner.
number 5 and 6.
So in general, no, it's before item number 7. Right, item number 7 is update and discussion on impacts on statewide drought and on water and hydroelectric supplies.
That'll change every.
Where do you want to change it to on the agenda?
Well, in other words, commissioner comments right now comes after the update on drought.
Understood.
And Garth, you feel you're conflicted on the update on the drought, right?
I would be conflicted on that. I would have to leave before that item.
Right, so and commissioner comments right now come after that item, and Garth will be gone, so we put commissioner comments before the drought.
And in fact, on item number 6, we have the
Oh.
legislative items. part
And
of
there's
which
water
are
in there
water.
as well,
Yes.
so we
So
move that
That's
up
the
this way.
last one.
So
It'll be split.
So why
Okay.
don't we move it up further?
I was going to ask if you would, I think last year we did the same, I was in the same
Oh, we're
predicament.
splitting the,
So the commission could consider them partitioned, everything other than water, and then I leave and then you do the water.
Yes.
That's the way we'll do on
Sounds
that
good.
item.
okay.
As to where
Is there
to
any
move.
reason that we couldn't have commissioner comments earlier in the meeting? Is there some reason?
No.
that it-
Between Roman numeral 6 and 7, for
Yes.
example?
Or
Oh,
between 5
Roman
and
numerals,
6.
it's funny, because I thought you were
Yeah.
saying
Yeah,
number,
to put 'em- so to put it
Arabic
here.
Arabic numeral, but you mean Roman
Or-
numeral.
Right.
Roman numeral.
Either
Sure.
under
Steve, you fine with that?
unfinished business
Roman numeral, and just move it ahead of everything. You got it, commissioner comments moving up.
Very good.
Okay, very good.
After
Any other comments on the agenda?
new business.
Okay.
We're going to do commissioner comments.
Quick question for you, Ms. Mullen. Issues, Ms. Schwartz, you were making a reference to discussion from last year with the city attorney's office on communications. So am I getting that wrong? Do we need
Right,
input from
right,
Ms.
well-
Mullen on that? Do we?
Well, Jessica and I talked, and so she said that you were already starting to work on something.
And is this our issue on the agenda, or is this on something else?
I think this is on how items for the agenda would be set.
That I'm definitely, you and I have discussed that,
Yes.
and I can comment on that. Is that what you're talking
No.
about? That's what I thought. There's two different subjects here. So I would suggest, unless, Jessica, you feel there's another place to do it, that you raise your point in commissioner comments, and then we'll figure out what to do. Sounds good. Okay. That's agenda. All right, reports from commissioner meetings and events. Holidays, fun trips. Okay, Judith?
So the reason that I wasn't at the last meeting was I had been invited to speak in Colombia at a big conference that was in Medellin, which was hosted in part by EPM, which is an enormous municipal utility down there. And it was very interesting to be talking about what were trends and things that were happening in the United States and how they affected things that they were trying to do in Colombia. And what was also interesting about this particular utility was that it's like they run the town. You know, they are in charge of multiple resources, and just like we are, and they really have a big impact. And one of the things that they are very proud of is that they have been part of the effort to push the drug cartels out of Medellin. So it was really interesting to see utility as a major force in the community. And I spoke on customer engagement, and our session was well received. And it was just a big trade show, and we had a lot of interaction with. We had some young students who were from the college, who were our guides to take us around all the speakers that came from the States. It was a very nice setup. It was a lot of fun.
Well, given who used to run the town in Medellin, that sounds like a positive development. All right, great, good to hear. Anything else? Steve?
Thanks. I wanted to talk just for a minute about dewatering and groundwater.
Wait, but hold on one sec. We are.
We are at meetings.
This is reports from commissioner meetings and events.
Sorry.
So
You're right.
hang tight.
I
We're
jumped
going to
around.
be back to you in a minute.
No, I have nothing to say about it.
Okay, fine. All right. Acting Director of Utilities report.
Yes, very good. Thank you, commissioners. Once again, my name's Ed Shikata, Assistant City Manager. I'm trying to make sure those titles are correct. Assistant City Manager and Interim Director of Utilities. So it's my pleasure to be with you this evening, as well as for probably the next few months as we proceed through our recruitment of the next Utilities Director. I do have a few things to report, so let me walk through my list. In terms of the Hayworth Solar project, on December 22nd, Hayworth Solar project officially achieved commercial operations, becoming the second of the city's large-scale PV projects to do so. 27-megawatt project located east of Bakersfield, expected to generate almost 64,000 megawatt hours per year, or about 6.6% of the city's total electric load. With the addition of this project, the city's renewable portfolio standard level is now projected to be at 36.5%, exceeding the 33% target in the city's long-term electric acquisition plan. 3 remaining large-scale solar PV projects under contract expected to come online by the end of this calendar year. On Palo Alto Clean, January 8th, City received our first application under Palo Alto Clean Energy Accessible Now Clean program to purchase locally generated renewable electricity. Through Clean, City will purchase all energy and output from the PV generating systems at 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour, as you know, either 20 or now 25-year contract term up to a maximum program capacity of 3 megawatts. First application is for 113 kilowatt solar carport installation at the unit Unitarian Universalist Church, Palo Alto, for a 25-year contract term. In terms of Georgetown University Energy Prize Competition, Georgetown University released latest rankings of top-performing cities and counties participating in the Energy Prize Competition. After first quarter of the Energy Saving Challenge, 6 months of total completion time frame of 24 months, Palo Alto is ranked in the top third. Cities stepping up our efforts on energy savings through programs such as the Home Energy Efficiency Genie audit, while encouraging customers to help additional renewable generation and climate protection goals. Our pilot heat pump water heater program is proceeding. In early this year, we are launching a pilot program to encourage residential customers to replace gas water heaters with electric heat pump water heaters. These appliances, I'm sure you know, are more efficient and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Programs being developed as part of our evaluation for electrification opportunities and part of the council-approved electrification work plan. Initial pilot will target 20 homes, with the program hoping to address barriers, identify barriers to adoption, and gather customer feedback. Drought is continuing, as you know. Current weather to the contrary, but nonetheless, that the city is proceeding on our way to meeting our 24% water use reduction target. Continuing our messaging, Catherine Elvert and team's work as water conservation efforts must continue. And we are proceeding with that. Just one last note, and sure you've been tracking through recent news. This was not on the script, so just to note, the last few weeks being very heavy in terms of our maintenance operations staff dealing with infrastructure issues, both during the holidays, sanitary sewer main blockage, as you may have heard about on the 800 block of Embarcadero, as well as a couple of notable water main service lines that were hit or actually needed repair on Ross Road as well as on Edgewood Drive. So our crews have been very busy through the wee hours of the morning, and in some cases more than our crews, in addressing customer needs as well as communications from that. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you on the heat pump side. Who is running that project? Is that being run by CPAU staff? Is there an third party doing so? Have we identified the 20 homes? Like, kind of where are we on that effort?
Jane, could you elaborate?
Yes, it is run by CPAU, and so we're at the beginning stages of it.
Are we looking? Are we going to solicit homeowners and so on and so forth?
I don't know. It's too early for me to answer that question.
Okay.
How we're going to do it. We're looking for the money now and how we're going to set it up.
And so the idea is to kind of see the idea is to run it with 20 homes and then hopefully lay the groundwork to do it not citywide, but encourage people to do it. Is that the idea?
The idea is we're trying to understand what the obstacles, what the barriers are. We want to get customer feedback on the performance of these units to see whether people like them or not, how they really operate, and so there'll be, we'll have a lot of metering to figure out,
Do we have
things working.
So this is really just an informal process. It's not
pilot.
It's not really a pilot per se.
It's a pilot, yeah.
Well, I mean, but there's
like
no
a 20
design.
person pilot.
It's a little pilot to test what we're trying to find out. Test whether people like this, how much it costs, what do people encounter when they're trying to install this.
If someone in Palo Alto wanted to get a heat pump water heater outside of this program or whatever, do we have a rebate in effect? Does anyone know? Or who knows?
I believe we have a rebate. Do you know, Catherine?
For just
Heat pump water heaters?
not yet.
So this could come out of this process, in theory.
I could be wrong.
Don't worry about it. Don't hold you
It
to it.
may come out of it. There's
Right.
a lot of other things we have to work out about which fund is supporting this and everything else. There's a lot that
To think
could go
through.
into that.
Okay, good to
So
know.
right now, we're just trying to find out, how do they work? Do people like them?
Right.
What's the, what reaction are we going to get from people having them? And then be able to demonstrate that to people who, if it turns out to be a great idea, show that to people.
And this initial program is water heaters, not furnaces and air conditioners?
Yes, it's for residential hot water heating. Yep.
So-
That's it.
And I am sorry, I'm incorrect. There is currently a rebate for the heat pump water heaters, and it's available on our Smart Energy Rebate Program website.
So if anybody who wants to volunteer, they can be part of it? Is that how it works?
We haven't determined how we're going to pick the people, or we're going to solicit people or try to find them.
Sounds like a topic we might want to bring back.
Just on the subject of energy efficiency, I read somewhere, I can't remember where, on our, I don't have the right name, our home energy efficiency program through Clear Result, it's a Home Energy Genie, something or other program. I felt like I read several dozen households in Palo Alto, and again, you may not be prepared on this, and so I'll look around. How it's been promoted well, a few dozen people have signed up for it. Any anecdotal evidence on anything in particular from that yet, in terms of feedback, or who knows so far?
I don't have any
Okay.
yet. I mean, you'll
All right.
see all
Well,
that stuff
took
in the annual DSM report, though.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I took the plunge and made the call, so I'll be at a future meeting, I'll report on how it goes. Any of you are welcome to join me in that. Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, next up is unfinished business. I assume we have none. And now it's commissioner comments. So let's start with you, Steve.
All right, thanks. I wanted to comment briefly on dewatering and groundwater. I think most of the people in the room know what dewatering is, but just in case someone doesn't, or someone watching us on TV, dewatering is the process where if homeowners want to build a basement below the local water table, they can remove the water from that region through pumping over a period of time until it gets dry enough so that a watertight concrete basement can be put in place. And this subject's been receiving attention over an extended period of time, but received a lot more attention and traction during just the last couple of months. This is in part due to Palo Alto resident Keith Bennett, who's taken this on as a bit of a personal cause and has started a website called Save Palo Alto's Groundwater and has done some research on this. The City Council's scheduled to take this up, the subject of dewatering and its impact on groundwater and whether there should be any policy changes around this in late January or early February. I believe it's currently scheduled for the February 1st City Council meeting. The interim director and I talked about the possibility of putting it on the UAC's agenda tonight to give the UAC an opportunity to provide some input to the City Council in advance of their meeting a few weeks from now. And ultimately decided that that probably wasn't a good idea, so that's why you don't see it on the agenda tonight. There was no opportunity for staff to prepare supporting material, and we really didn't want to interfere with the City Council's process that's already in place. It's not clear that they're going to reach any conclusions or rule on anything February 1st, although of course the City Council will do what the City Council wants to do. But it may very well be the case that they're going to use that meeting to decide what the path forward ought to be, and that could include coming back to us, the Utilities Advisory Commission, in one of our future meetings. So we decided to let that process run. I plan to make an effort to attend that meeting. Of course, I can't speak formally on behalf of the UAC since we haven't discussed it. I intend to share some of my own personal thoughts and tell them that even though the UAC hasn't addressed it, that I'm quite confident in stating that I think the UAC would welcome the opportunity to weigh in on this. This is clearly, to my thinking, the sort of thing that the UAC likes to comment on. It has to do with groundwater, which we view as a water resource that we have concern about. It touches on many of the long-term sustainability issues that we care about here as well. So just wanted to make everyone aware of that.
Sounds good, thank you. Okay, I also have a comment on a separate issue, but Judith, why don't you go first, and then we'll circle back to me.
Sure. So one of the questions that was prompt for me when we were dealing with the fiber subcommittee was how to present information that I had done some research about that I thought was relevant to the discussion. And then, so we went through this whole back and forth, and I learned about the commissioner memo, and that was one vehicle, but then it turned out that we couldn't get it on the agenda soon enough for the timing, so by doing my comments and commissioner comments, I could do it. It got attached, but then Commissioner Ballantyne put together a report that was sort of just some slides that went out to other commissioners. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, what is the right way that we can share information? So someone like me, who's in the industry, who, without being attached to one technology or another, I just get a lot of information across my desk, and I hear about a lot of things, or I go to meetings where I learn about a lot of things. And so there are things that I'd like to share with my fellow commissioners and with the city council. And so one of the questions...
And the public.
Pardon? And the public.
Everything that gets shared with us gets shared with the public.
Yes, I'm sorry. To imply that, of course. And then, so my question is, what are the right vehicles, and are there some better ways to do it? And the other piece of this is, I don't have any real sense of whether they actually get to the city council at all. So the city council person who had been coming to our meetings, he's only come to, who's our liaison, has only come to, I think, 2 of the meetings since, and I see you're here, but it's in kind of less formal capacity. So I just don't know. So if we write something or put something together, does the city council ever hear what we talked about, or see what we wrote, or know that we did it? And surely there must be some way to easily share an article, or share an article with some commentary, and if it's going, and it can be posted in a way where the public can see it, I think is fine. I'm not suggesting that it needs to be any kind of closed situation, but what's a better way that we can
So let's
understand?
get some feedback from I think we'll start with Ms. Mullen on that issue. You from the city attorney's perspective? No? Your facial expression says, no, this one isn't you.
I'm happy to.
Feel free to kick it back to Ed and Jane if you'd like.
Well, and I don't want to step on your toes, so if you wanted to weigh in first,
Okay,
either way.
well, I'd be
Okay,
happy
I can
to.
jump in after.
Well,
the
all right,
different
sure, and perhaps just I could share my understanding of the way that it has worked, perhaps with Director Fong. My impression has been that, in particular for sharing of information, that has typically come through the utilities director. And in conversations with Director Fong, it was, let's say, somewhat limited to issues that are factual versus perhaps positional, or that could lead to some debate about the information, as well as obviously needing to fall within the area, the scope of responsibility of the UAC. So the actual application of that, though, is, I suspect, a topic that some might debate, and how that had played out previously. In terms of forwarding information to the council, any citizen can provide information that is forwarded to the council through the city.council@cityofpaloalto.org website. And in fact, I receive daily many emails that ultimately make its way to the city council, and is packaged actually as a part of the council agenda packet and transmitted to the council each week. So there's that level, but clearly from the commission, if it were a communication from the commission, then there would be more both stature to it, as well as presumably more formality in the way that we want to approach that. So I suspect that this does fall within the category of, in the conversation I had with the chair, what I might suggest as a little bit perhaps of experimentation that we do over the next couple of months, and see what works, and through conversation with the commission as to what criteria, if that's the right term, might make sense for identifying the kinds of items. Again, one relating to the discussion of the commission. That's one perhaps category of topics. Another is information that comes from the commission as a body to the council. That's an entirely, I think, higher and somewhat level of communication that we'd want to think through the appropriate both process, as well as the roles of staff included in vetting the information that goes from the commission and input that we provide to the commission in identifying information that ultimately makes its way to the commission, to the council. So there's that, and in addition, I know you've got the commissioner memo process that is a manner of bringing items forward for more substantive discussion. So perhaps just a few thoughts, but again, leading to the conclusion that it might be worth our spending a little bit of time experimenting with what might make sense. And again, it's a bit of a no-fault circumstance in that I'm an interim, and when a new director comes in, that person may say, well, that guy didn't know what he was doing, other than obviously with the input of the city.
Okay, let me chime in on this a bit. So there's 7 members of this commission. From time to time, and not very often, someone here wants to share an article or something like that. In the normal world, of course, they would just type up the email and send it around to everyone. But of course, we live in the Brown Act world, so we can't do that. And so I think the practice is, and I think this is what you're saying, Ed, and to some extent what we've done before, is if I have an article I want to share with everyone, first of all, it's going to be related to the utilities in some way. It's not going to be whatever, it's something else, and no one abuses that. So we're going to send it to you, and you're going to send it out to all 7 of us with the usual disclaimer not to reply all for the usual Brown Act reasons. And I think that works.
And is it possible to do that in a way that isn't part of Catherine's report? Because if it's one of 20 items, it's much less likely to have it.
No, it's not part of Catherine's report. Okay. It's a standalone email from the director.
Okay.
Dear utility commissioners, and so on and so forth. Now, let's say you have an advocacy thing. You want to advocate on some issue, perhaps something not on the agenda or something that might be on the agenda. That's different. Then I think that has to be done. You either speak to it when it's agendized, or if it's not agendized, then I think you speak to it during commissioner comments. Everyone fine with that approach? All right, so that covers those 3 areas. Does that cover everything?
Well, I mean, so Commissioner Valentine's slides that he sent out. Okay, I had never seen we hadn't ever done anything like that. So there was some in there that you were stating some facts around things, and then you were giving an opinion of something that you thought would be a better approach. So was that an advocacy thing, that it should have been done in some other mechanism?
Well, I think in that case, I walked through in the prior meeting. We had gotten into a discussion when we were going through one of the items around whether or not local solar generation improves the supply of electricity. And I raised the point that in typical PV systems with a grid-tied inverter, the way they're wired, they don't. But if we had a desire to make them support the electrical resiliency and so forth, you could, and there are any number of ways. So,
but what I'm saying, but my point is that it wasn't. We don't need to get into the specifics.
Exactly.
But I guess what I'm saying
so what I did is I walked through exactly why that's true, because that seemed to be a new revelation for some of us, and then also, here are a list of ways you could make it resilient. And then I asked Jessica, now what do I do?
So if I could just interject, I think that, just a reminder that we are in sort of the commissioner comments section of the agenda. And I think what we've done here is maybe flesh out a few categories of areas where, we have some confusion or opportunities to do some piloting, that Ed sort of described. And so if we want to talk about approaches or differences in more detail, it might be a good idea at this stage to agendize it. To do that, or, talk to Ed directly. Or,
okay, so let's do the following. Let's agendize it for the next meeting, and in the meantime, we can have some conversations to clarify ahead of time. Is that okay?
We can we might want to just revisit during the future items discussion. Would that be okay?
As opposed, okay?
Yeah, either way, just a reminder if we're there.
Okie dokie.
And what are we agendizing? The grid-tied inverter?
No.
Okay, or just how we comment?
How we comment.
Communications among to the council.
Okay. Now I have a comment, but before I do so, just a point of clarification. First of all, we have one member of the City Council here, Councilmember Filseth. Eric, thanks for joining us. One clarification is Greg Scharf has traditionally been the City Councilor for some time, the city council liaison. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
Yes, as of this afternoon, when the committee assignments came out, he's still the official liaison. I am still, by the way, officially the alternate, and I'm here because he called me and told me he wasn't going to make it.
Got it. Well, we always enjoy seeing you, so thank you for coming. Okay, so my comment is there has been discussion over time on how items get agendized for our meetings. And there's occasionally been, well, let's see, for lack of a better word, a little bit of tension about it, because there are items that come up that we want to talk about, and in a normal world we talk about them. But of course, in a Brown Act world, we can't talk about anything unless it's agendized. So the obvious thing we do is we say, okay, we won't talk about it, we'll agendize it for the next meeting. But lo and behold, we can agendize it because we don't set our agenda, the Director of Utilities sets the agenda. And usually you'd say, okay, no big deal, we just ask the Director of Utilities to agendize it and it's all fine. But we've received pushback in the past on that because the Utilities Department has limited staff, limited time, and can't deal with having to prepare for our wanting to discuss something. So we've emphasized, don't worry, not action item, just discussion, no need to prepare anything. And even so, there's been some pushback. And then I think it gotten to the point where we were prepared to write a memo to the city council, and this went to what our bylaws, asking that our bylaws be changed so that we can set our own agenda and not be in this crazy situation where we can't talk about it because of the Brown Act. We can't agendize it because the Director of Utilities won't agendize it. And it's just irritating. Having said that, Ed and I had a good and productive conversation in which I think we're probably moving in the direction of not having that happen, and we have an open conversation, and if there's really some reason we shouldn't discuss it or whatever, then fine, we won't agendize it, but otherwise we will. And so for the moment, I'm sort of on the fence. On the other hand, the interim director is the interim director, and I would sure hate to see this happen again. So I'm sort of on the fence as to whether we should continue moving. We were close to me starting a commissioner memo to do this. But anyway, I just mentioned it if anyone else has comments, other than the fact you probably can't respond because of the Brown Act, whatever. We'll figure this out somehow. So I just throw that out there. And if you want to, or Jessica, you want to chime in any way, you're welcome to. But
I will walk softly and carefully, mindful of the Brown Act, but perhaps in the context of a preview of your item, selection of potential topics for future discussion, that we will agendizing at our next meeting.
Sounds good. All right. With that, I think anyone else have any comments? Great. It is now 7:36, so we're right on time for our 7:05 p.m. discussion on the FTTP. So let's get to that.
Oh, hi. Well, Happy New Year. Jonathan Reichenthal, the Chief Information Officer at the City of Palo Alto. Today we're going to give an update on activities and progress around our fiber to the premise and wireless activities. I'm going to be playing a supporting role. I'm going to hand you over to our utilities team, who are collaborating across many departments on this for the city. So I believe I'm handing you over to Jim Fleming.
Right. So, Chair Foster and Commissioners, my name's Jim Fleming. I'm a Senior Management Analyst with Utilities. I also want to recognize two of our other team members. Dave Yen is here this evening. Dave is the Strategic Business Manager for Utilities, and Josh Wallace is a key account representative with Utilities. So, you can go to the... Yeah, I'm gonna recognize it later. This evening we'll provide you with an update about the staff's council-approved work plan for fiber to the premises and wireless, in addition to the status of discussions with Google Fiber and AT&T. To provide a brief summary, at the September 28th council meeting, council approved a motion directing staff to pursue several tasks simultaneously related to fiber and wireless initiatives. These tasks include establishing a work plan related to the fiber to the premises master plan and wireless network plan prepared by the city's consultant, CTC Technology and Energy. This additional work required amending the contract with CTC to provide additional consulting services to complete the fiber and wireless tasks included in the council's motion. The council approved these CTC contract amendments on November 30th. In addition to the city's current fiber and wireless evaluations related to the fiber to the premise master plan and wireless network plan, council also directed staff to initiate negotiations with third-party broadband service providers, which involves pursuing discussions with Google Fiber and AT&T to explore so-called co-build opportunities for fiber to the premises. These co-build discussions will be addressed in a moment. Also, in anticipation of the large volume of work related to these various fiber and wireless initiatives, at the November 30th council meeting, the council approved a staff recommendation to hire a temporary fiber and wireless program manager. I'll discuss this position more in a moment. So if you could go to the next slide. The tasks in the fiber to the premises work plan and target completion dates are as follows. First, with the assistance of CTC Technology and Energy, staff is reviewing outside plant cost estimates in the fiber to the premise master plan and with the Citizen Advisory Committee. And I want to acknowledge this evening, I think we have one member of the Citizen Advisory Committee here, Christine Moe. We will document any disagreements and discrepancies between the committee's estimates and CTC's estimates. The target date for completion of this task is mid-February, and the specific differences will be reported to the council as directed in their September 28th motion. Second, as previously mentioned, staff was directed to initiate co-build negotiations with Google Fiber and AT&T. Discussions are underway with Google. Staff contact with AT&T has been initiated, but discussions with AT&T have not yet occurred. The third task is to develop a Dig Once ordinance to advance the expansion of broadband in Palo Alto. The city attorney's office is responsible for this task. Many cities have adopted some form of Dig Once policy that opens streets and rights-of-way to utility construction when related projects are underway. Such policies protect roads and sidewalks and minimize traffic and other disruptions related to utility construction. But also, these policies create a more uniform and efficient means of constructing network infrastructure by giving multiple entities, including the city itself, the opportunity to place fiber or conduit inexpensively. The target completion date for the ordinance is the end of March. Fourth, with the assistance of CTC, develop and issue a request for information to explore municipally owned and private-public partnership models for fiber to the premises. Work on the RFI is underway, and once a draft is ready, staff will review it with the Citizen Advisory Committee and request their feedback. The target date to issue the RFI is the end of March. The evaluation of the RFP responses will occur between June and September of this year. For the wireless plan, the council directed tasks for the completion of several tasks. The first task is to update the citywide wireless network scenarios in the plan with 20-year forecasts. This task has been completed. With the assistance of CTC, the second task is to develop fiber backhaul information and cost estimates to expand Wi-Fi access in unserved city facilities and high-traffic areas high-traffic retail areas such as California Ave and University Ave. The target date to complete the development of this information is mid-February. Once this task is completed, CTC will work with staff to issue an RFP, and the target date to do this is by the end of March. Third, with the assistance of CTC, we also plan to issue another RFP for dedicated wireless communications for public safety and utilities, also by the end of March. Evaluation of the RFP responses will occur between June and September of this year. CTC will assist staff in this effort. Public safety staff is working with IT and utility staff in developing the RFP and will be involved in the evaluation of the responses. I'm going to do my Marco Rubio imitation here. Anyway, moving on here, Google Fiber. Right now, there are separate from the current co-build discussions with Google, there's ongoing staff work to develop various agreements for citywide fiber to the premises network build out by Google Fiber. This work and agreements include evaluating Google's draft project description, including construction methods, and working with the city attorney's office and the Planning and Environmental Services Department regarding review of the project under the California Environmental Quality Act. At a very high level, Google's proposed network deployment would be largely limited to the public rights-of-way, both underground and on utility poles. Google is proposing to construct an fiber-to-the-premise infrastructure that would facilitate offering gigabit internet and video service throughout the city. The review of the project description also includes developing a master encroachment agreement for the proposed project, in addition to a master license agreement for the attachment of fiber network facilities on utility poles jointly owned by the city and AT&T.
Just explain what a master encroachment agreement is.
In other words, the activities that will occur within the public rights-of-way. Their facilities would encroach upon the public rights-of-way, so they have to have an agreement in order to do that. And Jessica, do you really want to expand on that a little bit?
So whenever an applicant wants to put a particular facility in the public right-of-way, then typically they would secure potentially an encroachment permit if there's some sort of debris box or staging that's kind of placed there on a more permanent basis, or street work permit if they're digging, in that public right-of-way. And so there's general terms and conditions associated with each. So I think the idea here is that the master encroachment agreement, given the complexity and size of such a big project, would serve as kind of one umbrella type of permit for the encroachment piece, and then there would be individual sort of sub-permits underneath that would deal with specific infrastructure.
So due to the significant amount of city resources required by the Google Fiber project, staff is also working with the city attorney's office to develop a cost recovery agreement, so Google can reimburse the city for any cost that engages the city staff resources. The anticipated large volume of work for city staff includes the processing of applications to attach fiber optic infrastructure to approximately 6,000 utility poles, which will require coordinating with Google, AT&T, and Comcast to perform a variety of tasks, and those would include field investigations, utility pole load calculations, utility pole make-ready work, pole replacements, mapping, inspections, traffic control plans, tree trimming coordination, in addition to public works processing various permits to do aerial and underground construction within the public rights-of-way. In terms of the timeline, from the point Google begins its build-out, completion of the network would take 24 to 36 months. Regarding co-build opportunities, City Manager Keene and Chief Information Officer Jonathan Reichenthal have met with Google Fiber officials to explore what a co-build model for fiber to the premises would look like at a conceptual level. The key objective of these discussions is to explore the possibility of the city collaborating with Google as they build out their network to install a parallel city dark fiber network in areas currently not passed by the existing backbone, particularly in residential neighborhoods. The intent of the discussions at this time is to form the basis for a set of principles to pursue a model that would need to obtain an initial vetting by the legal counsel of both organizations. The city and Google will meet during the week of January 18th to continue these discussions. If there are co-build opportunities, a timeline is not known at this point. However, Google stated that predictability and speed are key cornerstones of their network build-out. Moving on to AT&T and their Gigapower service. Gigapower is an AT&T initiative that is expected to deliver an ultra-fast fiber network with broadband speeds up to 1 gigabit per second. 100 candidate cities in AT&T's operating areas throughout the country are in play right now. Palo Alto is one of those cities. In Palo Alto, AT&T plans to install approximately 27 cabinets in about half of the city. We understand that most of these cabinets will be located next to existing cabinets already in place for AT&T's UVerse service. If AT&T gains a sufficient take rate for Gigapower service, the remainder of the city will be built out. AT&T is in the process of initiating permits for the use of rights-of-way to install these cabinets for Gigapower, and the timetable to begin construction is this year. In terms of staffing, we can move on to the next slide. The staffing for the current fiber and wireless initiatives is 1.75 full-time equivalents from the IT and Utilities Department. Based on the anticipated staffing needed for the city's fiber and wireless initiatives, in addition to the expected high volume of work due to Google's and AT&T's plans, the amount of staff and necessary skill sets is not currently in place. As a result, on November 30th, at the November 30th council meeting, the council approved a staff recommendation to hire a temporary fiber and wireless senior program manager position for up to 3 years and an annual cost of $228,000. The job description for this temporary position is currently under development, and recruitment is expected to begin soon. This position will work across city departments and with third-party providers. The preferred candidate should have a background in fiber network design, engineering, construction, in addition to an ability to navigate city processes for a large-scale construction project. The candidate for this position will also be expected to communicate effectively with the City Council, Utility Advisory Commission, staff, and the community about the various fiber and wireless initiatives. So that's my report, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thanks very much, and thanks to all of you for your work on this. Garth?
Thanks for the really concise report. So catching me up to speed, maybe others too, there was a time when Google had apparently a process in place to try to identify a limited number of cities with which it would work. And Palo Alto applied, as I understand it, to be one of those, but probably many others did too. And last I heard, we had not heard, Palo Alto had not heard as to whether Google had selected it or not. But I just infer from your report that it must have. Palo Alto must have been selected, or maybe still in the running to be selected, so actively so that Google is investing time with the city on that. And then I have some follow-up questions too.
Yeah, I think Palo Alto is still in the running to be selected. We're well along in their process. Okay. In the way Google is approaching their build-outs is they're looking at specific regions. The region here in California, Northern California, is San Jose, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, and Palo Alto. So they are working with all of those cities currently to move along various activities like these encroachment permits and other agreements that have to be in place. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking to them for the better part of the last 2 years, but now we're at a point where it's nuts and bolts issues in terms of their build-out. Jonathan, you may want to add a little bit more to this.
I think you did a terrific job, unless there's a follow-up question. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, so I realized that from what you said, and you don't need to repeat, the co-build model is still under development. I understand that, but you will soon issue an RFI for a municipal fiber to the premises concepts. And I'm wondering how that may be structured. I realize you may be in the drafting stage right now, but if you have any thoughts as to how that may be structured, given that there are two very active discussions going on right now, and that the city itself has expressed an interest in expanding its own fiber network. So you've got three entities that are in play to provide services within the city. And by the way, I really do like the idea of not one exclusive entity. For obvious reasons, competition is wonderful. Customer choice is a really good thing. However, how's this all going to work together? You've got so many pieces coming together, and I'm wondering how, at least in the interim, how you're managing your process on the co-build idea.
Yeah, in terms of the council directed us to go ahead and issue the RFI. A component of the RFI will ask the potential respondent their view of Google being in the market or not being in the market. So it's, for lack of a better way to say it, it is an awkward time. There's a lot of activity around this, but the RFI, which was directed by under the city council motion, said go ahead and issue that RFI during this period.
Okay. I'll hold any further questions for now.
Okay. Just to be clear, because I think it says differently in here, the city's only planning to lay conduit for the backbone, right? Not to the premises. Right now in the report it says how the city can lay its own conduit to the premise. That's not the discussion with Google, is it? It's just a misstatement in here?
I would characterize the discussion with Google on a co-build as very preliminary. The scope of it is to come in subsequent meetings.
The concept we've talked about internally is to lay conduit so we would have it available at some point in the future.
Yeah, it would be both. Well, most of the cabling, by the way, would be aerial. About 70% of it. It would go as close as you could to the house without going from the street to the house.
Okay.
Google are generally supportive of continuing the discussions. To that degree,
That was my next question.
yeah. So they will. We didn't want to limit it, and Google also agreed with that. We don't want to limit the nature of the conversation. But taking it to the street, they have a very specific go to market approach. Their plan now is to have fiber throughout the entire city. Initially, it was just whoever bought it, except for some very. They like density, of course. So in some less dense areas, they may not go there, but that represents a very small percentage of the city. But as they go down each street, they will ask, they will knock on doors and ask, do you want Google while we're here? And there will be a period of time. So we would, at the same time, would like to go with them on that. But not necessarily, Google will sell to the house and bring the wire to the house, but not necessarily our wire to the house.
Thank you.
So, are any of the other cities that are in the local group also looking to do a co-build?
Not that I'm aware of.
We're not aware of that.
So, is that likely to make them less interested in us because it's going to be more complicated, or do you think it's not an issue, or what's your sense of that? We
don't think it's an issue. They're very interested in exploring this and experimenting with it. They regardless of what we do, whether we co-build or not, they would go forward, assuming all the planets align, which we think they will. They need speed and predictability. So if the city's efforts and our demands are not consistent with that, that could present as something to talk about. But that would not stop their initiative. They will go forward. So they don't consider this at this point in any way an overhead or an impediment, because it'll be their desire to move forward at their pace anyway. And when the city manager and I spoke to the local team, we summarized this information to the head of Google Fiber, Dennis Kish, and he agreed that we should continue this conversation, so he's supportive.
And so so when you issue the RFI, you said you're gonna put word the RFI so that the entity has to consider whether they're dealing with Google and AT&T in the market or not in the market as part of it. And so I'm assuming that that's going to affect the economics of what the expectations would be.
That's correct.
And so does that then? So is the city council going to have a review of what they're setting this up to be? Are they going to be looking at the RFI at all, or do you guys just go do it?
No, we would anticipate the RFI is broad enough that we're going to get lots of different flavors of different ways of doing this together with the city. We are as curious as everyone else to see who responds to that and what models might come back. My assumption would be we would construct some sort of presentation of that feedback, of what the market has done to the UAC and to the council, I imagine, for additional guidance.
If I could add a little bit more to that, when CTC did their report, their recommendation was to issue an RFI for a private-public partnership model, that it would be very difficult for the city to pursue fiber to the premise on its own, that it might want to look to the private sector, and there's a number of different models that are out there. So the intent of the RFI is to explore what's out there at this point, fully acknowledging that the market is at a very active point in terms of new entrants, potentially from Google, and also AT&T upgrading their network, and Comcast also eventually upgrading their network to provide gigabit speed to consumers at a reasonable price.
So one thing that I did not see in the previous documents, and it wasn't in the write-up relative to what the city council said, was what is this for? Why are we doing it? And I guess I just want to bring up again, as I did in my commissioner comments, that I think we need, whenever we do, is to take a step back and say, what are the applications that people are going to use? What is it? What is the reasoning for doing it? Jonathan and I had a conversation about, is it building a highway for something that may yet be? So as we're looking at the idea of, recommending that the city spend 77 million or whatever the exact number is, what's it for? And why are we doing it? And I think that has been left out of every document I've seen. So I would just ask that get put into the documents.
As kind of a counter to that, if in the CTC report, they acknowledge that the cost to build a network is very high, and that there's a lot of risk in doing that. Again, to mitigate that risk to some extent, the goal is there a potential partner from the private sector that could lessen the risk?
Whether there's a partner or not a partner or whatever, it's why are we what is it that how are people going to benefit if we do this? What are they going to be able to do that they can't do today? What do we think they're going to, so what's it for?
I think
other than bragging rights.
Right. I think there's something, Commissioner Schwartz, that I think it's high-speed internet.
What are you going to do with that?
So what are you going to do with that? So
what applications are you going to use that you can't use with the technologies today?
Right.
That you need this bigger pipe for.
So I could make some uninformed comments on that based on my own personal experience on reliability of existing so-called high-speed wireless, but
I think that was actually the point of what I was writing, because if you want to make it so that you can watch movies faster at your house, this isn't going to solve that problem. And I think that's the part that why we need to have the conversation, or where it needs to be written about what it's for, because if you're watching Hulu and Hulu gets clogged at 7 o'clock at night, just because you have fiber isn't going to change that. And so,
Jonathan, can you comment on that?
So, in fairness to Commissioner Schwartz, I don't think there is a city staff written document that outlines the business case in its entirety. I was just thinking about whether, I believe in the CTC report, it may talk about the benefits of fiber communities where it's been rolled out. There is some very strong evidence for economic, there's positive economic outcomes in lower economic areas. There's certainly tremendous support for smart grid.
But Jonathan, to Judith's point, what does FTTP allow anybody to do that can't be done without it? I have some thoughts on this, but again, from you're the city's CIO, so you'll be more informed. Judith is Commissioner Schwartz is saying to some extent, hold on, we're spending all this time on something that serves no purpose. Mm-hmm. My guess is there are folks who would disagree with the notion that there is no purpose to it. So she's asking, what is the purpose? What can you do with FTTP that I can't do with Comcast today or DSL or whatever else?
Well, so a couple of thoughts on that topic. So Palo Alto is a broadband community.
Right.
I mean, broadband, no, I'm having difficulty with that word tonight, is defined by the FCC, I guess, as 25 megabits download, about 5 or 6 upload.
We are not a community that is lacking of broadband connectivity.
We're defined as a high-speed internet community. Today, as we sit here, I would be hard pressed to find a solution that can't be addressed with the high-speed internet we have today.
Mm-hmm.
The baked into all of this is the assumption that the world is headed very rapidly to a world in which connectivity, the Internet of Things, telemedicine, just a basic right in society is to access information quickly and video, and will be required, and we're sort of making that investment in the future.
So this is less about not what can and cannot be done today, but in anticipation of the future and investment for the future.
I think that is an accurate assessment. I do think there has to be more voices on this topic. I think the community does feel strongly about this, that it is an investment in the future. If you're asking specific applications, I would struggle with that answer.
Now, let me ask you a question. When I hear from many people who say my internet connection is less than optimal, they use other words for it, and so a question is, would FTTP help address those concerns or not? I hear Commissioner Schwartz saying maybe not. It may be when Hulu isn't working at 7 p.m., it's not your internet connection, it's whatever it is. What do you think about that?
So fundamentally, fiber to the premise is the fiber, is the cable. But to enable high-speed access to internet data, it is multidimensional. I mean, you've got the speed of the provider, you've got all the different hops across the international network. You have the quality of your ability to receive the information, the amount of traffic. Fiber as a type of cable in of itself won't guarantee a perfect performance, because there's many qualities that have to work. Even if you have a gigabit to your house, you might only get 20 megabit connection to a particular website or service. I don't mind going on the record to say it's not a guarantee of better service. There's no doubt that the pipe will be much larger, and content that can move fast and will move fast over fiber. Somebody who might be able to talk a little further, potentially, maybe Joshua, the topic, or even Jim.
Yeah, if I could add, and this is a good subject in terms of what communities should be doing to ensure that citizens have more than adequate access to broadband. Google has moved the market. I don't think you'd see AT&T necessarily moving ahead with their gigabit power service. And also, don't forget about Comcast. Comcast is moving rapidly too to up their game in terms of internet speeds. Are they going to build fiber to the premise? No, except in greenfield areas. What they will do is add the electronics to their networks to increase the speeds. It's not so much the cable, whether it's coax fiber. Fiber has more capacity, that's obvious. It's more about the electronics that are attached to those cables and how quickly you can have the bits arrive to your home. The world is moving very quickly, particularly with the Internet of Things and other applications that are coming down the pipe. So what Google has done is move the market just with the potential that they may compete in certain markets, and they're building, or they're moving very quickly. I mean, since we last met, they've announced that they're going to go through the process, the checklist process that we've already gone through with Chicago and Los Angeles. Those are huge markets. In addition to all the other markets they've already announced, they're really improving consumer access to broadband by entering into those markets and getting the incumbents, the telcos and the cable companies, to up their game, and that's happening. So, getting back to your original question, what is this all for? It'll go well beyond access to Netflix and Hulu and so forth. It'll be all these other applications that will come into the home that aren't necessarily there today, but in the future. Telemedicine is an example. Consumers.
So I just want to say it would be helpful if those kinds of things were added to the documents to say what it is. If we're going to make the investment, then what's it for?
And there is a section in the CTC report about the different types of applications that are emerging that aren't necessarily common in a typical household today, but there is a section in the report about that.
I could add to that too. I think it's very helpful to get a historical perspective on the growth of bandwidth and the depth and the complexity of applications. I would basically have.
If you could back up just.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I was shoved in my face. I thought I was supposed to come meet it and talk, be the rock star, right? Oh, this is okay. If we look at the growth of bandwidth, it's essentially exponential since about 1994. And if we look back at that, we were dealing with kilobits. A tiny little modem, right? Remember, it was all text, and it was almost cryptic lines of text, whatnot. Now we've got basically three-dimensional capabilities in 20 years. Now, if we think that trajectory of bandwidth and complexity of applications is going to somehow stop or plateau or just discontinue in one shape or another, then perhaps we don't have a business plan here. Perhaps we don't have a community benefit. But if we think that the world is going to continue on the line that it's been on for the last 20 plus years, then we need to be able to meet that. And there's all kinds of analogies like cars on freeways and whatnot, but simply the exponential use of bandwidth as it increases. I would also add to that as we get more bandwidth, it tends to be monitored by, or the bandwidth becomes, the applications become in tune with the amount of bandwidth that we have. And not casting aspersions, but a lot of the major incumbent players have sort of limited bandwidth, saying, we can't give you more bandwidth. So if you have a 5 megabit downstream available, you're going to see applications that fit 5 megabits. Then they start to open up more and more bandwidth, and you get more and more applications. When we've gone from, 14 baud modems up to 25 down, 100 down, and we're seeing a lot more depth. I mean, the idea of getting a movie in 1996 was a full day's exercise.
I'm feeling like I hijacked me, and it wasn't what my intention was.
It's a great conversation.
I just want to put in what it's for in the documents, and that's all I'm asking for.
Sure. Can do.
Today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. I lost track of where we were. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Go for it.
But don't get too close to the microphone.
Yeah.
Is that working okay? Our next item on our agenda is to discuss undergrounding of electrical overhead lines, and that's relevant here because the discussion with Google at least involves their use of almost all of the 6,000 poles that we have in the city. We, over the course of the last number of decades, we've got to the point where we've got the utilities undergrounded in 47% of the city. And setting aside the question of whether or not it's equitable to have certain neighborhoods largely focused in one part of the city undergrounded and the large swaths of other parts of the city not undergrounded. And undergrounding, of course, is done because we think it has benefits. We think it is visually better. We think it has it might increase property values. It certainly is something that we desire. But setting aside this sort of larger philosophical question, in the past we've had an agreement with AT&T that allowed us to recover some of the costs of undergrounding from them as we took the utility poles and put them underground. I'd like to see some requirement in the master license agreement, which puts other users like Google Fiber potentially on the hook for costs that we'll want to recover as we underground those systems. So that's just a comment. Thanks very much.
Nope, no comment. Anything else? Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good luck.
Okay, next up is the report on the current status of the electric overhead to undergrounding conversion program. And let's see, we do have a memo on that. And do we have
We do not have a presentation.
So we're just teed up for discussion?
Yes, that's correct.
Should we just jump right in, or any comments on your side?
Other than the last comment did cause City Attorney and I to pause and contemplate what that might involve. So perhaps proceed with your discussion and we'll chime in.
Let's do introductions first.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Foster and members of the Commission. My name is Tom Chain. I'm the Electric Engineering Manager.
Good evening, Chair Foster, members. I'm Dean Batchelor. I'm an Assistant Director for Utilities.
Good to see you both.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. So what we wanted to do is kind of give just a brief overview of kind of some of the report. We have a little bit more detail that we wanted to give, and then we thought maybe we'd open up for some questions at that point.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So just an over roughly what the program involves. It involves undergrounding all of the electric, or not just the electric utilities, but all utilities on wood poles. This is a program that's funded by the utilities and by the property owners when they have to underground their own services. City of Palo Alto follows the undergrounding based on their rule and regulation 17. AT&T has a different CPUC tariff, rule 32, that they follow whenever they, for underground districts. To date, this program started back in 1965. To date, the city's established 47 districts with AT&T. 43 have been completed since 1965, and the last report that we provided to the UAC Finance Committee and Council was back in 2013. At that time, as I mentioned, AT&T follows a tariff which defines which areas they will participate in the costs of the underground districts. A majority of the areas we have left are residential, which means those residential areas do not fall under their tariff as participating. So back in 2013, we presented information to UAC and Finance Committee trying to figure out how we were going to pay for these additional areas where AT&T would not participate in some of the costs. A recommendation was made to present to Council to look at developing a Citizens Advisory Committee to look at how are we going to pay for those extra costs. We presented that recommendation to Council, and it was failed 4-5. So at that time, we decided, staff decided we were going to go forward with the districts that we had in place and continue to speak with AT&T about other areas that they may want to participate. So currently we are working on underground districts 46 and 47. 46 is at the intersection of Arrastradero and El Camino. 47 is in the area of Channing House, around Channing Avenue, Addison Avenue, Cowper, and Middlefield Road. 47, we've just completed installation of all of the substructures, which are the conduits and boxes. In the coming months, we're going to start installation of the electric facilities. Once we're done with the electric facilities, then AT&T will come next and install their communications along with Comcast. Once AT&T and Comcast are completed, then AT&T will then remove all the poles. 46 is currently in design, where engineering has we've established the ordinance establishing the district, and now engineering is currently working on a design. Once we have the layout, we'll work with AT&T and Comcast on that also.
So to get to what Commissioner Cook was just saying before, so does that mean that if the fiber needs the pole, they're going to keep the pole for the fiber?
No. All utilities go underground.
So everything will go
Yes.
underground.
So when we get to the point with Google will be leasing space the intent is possibility is that Google will be leasing space from the City of Palo Alto. So when we've established an underground district, that means all utilities have to go underground. AT&T will go underground. Comcast, as a leasee of AT&T, though they don't have a tariff that requires them, being a leasee with AT&T, they have no rights to be on the pole. The pole will be removed, and they have to pay and participate in the cost of the trench.
So like in my neighborhood where the telephone lines are still on the poles,
yes,
but the electricity is undergrounded. So how does that work?
So I'm not sure what.
I live on Bryant Street.
Okay, so there may be areas. I don't think the whole street is underground.
On Bryant?
I know, we had to pay to put it underground
Okay.
for,
Okay, so it may not have been established as an underground district. It may have been that residents in that area wanted it underground, so they paid for that. Therefore, the city's paying a lesser portion of that undergrounding project. Whereas in an underground district, the city is taking on, primarily full cost of the undergrounding, except for undergrounding of the actual service on the property, on private property. So going back to that question about Google, if Google is leasing space from the city of Palo Alto, then they will have to pay for a portion of their undergrounding of their facilities. But we would have with undergrounding, we do what's called a joint trench, which means we trench once, we install all the conduits, and therefore we share the cost of that trench proportionally based on what we have in the substructures we have in there. So Google would be paying for a portion of that trench. Have you found, should I wait? Or so the last thing I had is, right now we're continuing at our current pace. We've had some brief discussions with AT&T about possible new underground districts that would fall under their tariffs. There are some areas we took the initiative to identify some areas that we thought met their rules. We highlighted them on our maps and said, okay, will you meet with us and talk about these? So there are certain areas that we think they will possibly agree to, which will continue the program up until all we have is basically only residential areas. And at that point, we'll have to have a discussion.
Mike? If I could add just
Sure.
one last thing. Excuse me. So there's about 14,000 homes that still need to be undergrounded. And so the way the cost breakdown portions of it is that it's about $20,000 for our electric facilities, for AT&T, and for Comcast. Comcast and AT&T right now pay about $2,000. That is just for the infrastructure. So that doesn't include their labor, their materials, anything that they need to do to get to the home. Where it costs the city right now, it costs about $11,000. And that $11,000 is the trench cost as well as materials, our own labor. And then that also includes approximately about a $5,000 conversion cost to go from your overhead panel to put your underground panel in. That has to be done. So right now it's around about a $20,000 cost per home. So if you take that approximately, we're talking about $280 million. If we wanted to take and do anything with the rest of the city, again, and that doesn't include if Google or if anybody else comes on, but it's about $2,000 if Google would come on. They would have to pay for their trench cost, and then of course their cabling, fiber, electronics, whatever else they needed to do.
Could I just clarify one thing? It sounds to me from the materials, and maybe something more you said, is that the $20,000 would be the combination of utility provider costs in order to trench down the street, for example. But each homeowner in those 14,000 that remain, would they have be required or have an option in order to, who would pay their costs on their own premises to link in to the primary facilities that the city and AT&T would be laying down in the streets?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
That would be their responsibility. Once an underground district is established by ordinance, all utilities have to go underground, including the service drops.
And so the process that was taken with the 45 or 46 so far, I'm assuming that there was some kind of a vote taken for each, just with each boundary to make sure, and is it, say, 51% is required in order to, or a higher percentage in order to have a go as to whether the systems are now undergrounded, or
Yes.
what is the threshold?
There is no established threshold. In most cases, I would say it's usually 50% or greater. We take one of the administrative tasks of establishing the district is going out, having public hearings, sending out information, doing surveys of all the customers, and then taking that information back and presenting it to council
for them to decide whether we should go forward in establishing a district. So there's nothing that says it has to be greater than 50% approval to do that.
And so just one quick follow-up, and then I'll move. So what is the gating function that stops you proceeding at a fairly expeditious pace and doing the whole city? I'm assuming one is whether each district really wants to do it. That's number one. It sounds like we just talked about that. Number two, you've identified as AT&T sometimes says yay, sometimes says nay. So there's two. I'm assuming that there are other things that would I can imagine, but you can tell me what the other functions are that would stop you from moving expeditiously to do the whole city.
One is the cost. One is the staffing that's required. One underground district could take approximately 3 years to complete. From when we start the administrative process to when we go through the design to actually go through the construction. So it's a significant amount of work and significant amount of cost to do.
But isn't it also correct that the vast majority of the parts that have been undergrounded in Palo Alto to date have been areas where we've gotten significant cost reimbursement from AT&T, and that going forward, we think we're unlikely to benefit from AT&T cost reimbursement for the majority of the not yet undergrounded regions?
Correct.
Yeah, so the cost becomes dramatically higher in the absence of AT&T cost reimbursement.
10% higher.
So based on the numbers that Dean was
10%,
mentioning,
yeah.
we were thinking it's going to cost approximately $28 million more to complete the projects.
So if people got fiber on the poles in those neighborhoods where they didn't underground it, so they might get another service that they like more, could that be a trade-off that people would say, well, we can get fiber to the premises in our neighborhood faster if we have poles? So that might actually be a positive thing for some neighborhoods who want the fiber more than the undergrounding. I mean, I'm sort of making a joke, but it actually could be a carrot. I don't know how, so, and an unintended carrot could be okay.
Because Google is looking at doing the overhead areas first, because it is much more economical for them to do the overhead areas.
When you reflect on recent years, is there a significant difference in terms of operating the those utility assets once they're undergrounded? It's a lot more reliable. We don't have to roll trucks out when they're underground, or the incidence rate of something happens and a line falls, and so I have to move people away from something that has a cost, or tree trimming and all those things. Is that something that you measure and track?
Yeah. Well, every time we have outages, we measure what type of outage and what failed.
Yeah.
Underground areas, when they're brand new, are typically more reliable.
What about when they're not brand new?
When they're not brand new, that's when things start to fail,
Okay.
and then it's much longer to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
So things are underground, you can't see where the problem is. You end up going and opening boxes and trying to find problems.
Yeah.
So when we actually have an outage, the outages is usually a longer duration on the underground, but you may have fewer of those. So one of the things that I failed to mention is we're not only working on underground districts, but we're also staff is working on rebuilding old underground districts. So cable that was installed back in the 70s and 80s, we've already replaced. So approximately 30 years later, we'll go out and start rebuilding an underground district that was established in the 1980s.
My recollection is that your staff told us at the last briefing on undergrounding that over the life of the deployment, undergrounding was actually less reliable and more expensive to maintain. And as I recall, the reason was moisture and water.
Well, it is more expensive to maintain. The equipment does not last as long. Transformers that sit in vaults, they're submerged in water. They'll usually have contaminants in that water, and it does damage to the cables and the equipment, and it doesn't last as long. And a submersible transformer can last maybe 30 years, or actually 15 years. Downtown, we predict maybe 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
A pad mount transformers, the above ground boxes, we're fine with those 30 plus years, not having any real issues.
Okay.
It's just being inside a vault, sitting in stagnant water, materials that can get flushed into our vaults can do some damage to the equipment.
Because we're not a part of the country that has big snowstorms and ice storms and whatever. So we don't get the reliability benefits that they get in the Northeast or something like that. And so, I think this was one of the things we talked about my first meeting, was that it's aesthetics. We're doing it for aesthetics, not for reliability.
The Navy went through a period where they started putting panels over the inside of submarines to make it look nicer. And then they figured out that then when there was an electrical fire, you had a heck of a time figuring out where. Mm-hmm. And so, the submarine I was on, there was none of that. You just looked at all the cable. But when the cable's got a problem, you know right where it is. Yes. So that's what I was wondering. And then the other question I had is, do you, when you underground or maybe replace underground, is that a time when you go in and make convenient upgrades in capacity so that, okay, here come all the electric vehicles and now you have a chance to be ready for a lot more of those?
We'll look at anything. We'll look at reliability improvements. We'll look at redesigning it. Some of the areas, the way it was designed, we had transformers that were just tapped off the main line. Yeah. Now we're changing our designs to where we have more protection so that if there's a problem on the circuits, it's isolated and it doesn't impact the whole circuit. So we do go through our current old designs, bring it up to current standards, and whatever else other improvements we need to do.
Thanks.
I have more of a process question. So Commissioner Cook and I boldly decided that we'd team up and identify various topics. So one of the topics that we selected was to review the undergrounding progress and strategy. And so I would appreciate it if at some point you could spend an hour or two with me and I could come, and probably the most efficient thing for me to do, rather than have you send me a lot of stuff on the internet, which would be fine, is to come and meet with you for about an hour. I know you're very busy, but an hour would be tops. And I could drill down and say what information you have. No new documents, but what do you have that would help me get a better handle on where you are and where you're going, and what the vision, the strategy is.
We could do that. I'd be happy.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
If I could just go back to Commissioner English's question a little bit more too about, when Tom was mentioning about that we underground our transformers in the vaults. If you think about it, is that a lot of the homes that were in the overhead areas, they were never built for underground. Where a new business park or a new business, there's always room for sub transformers that can be on a pad. So nobody wants to see that green big box in front of their home. So that's another issue that we have to deal with when we're back into the residential areas. You can stick it on the side, but then it's in front of someone else's window. And so part of this whole time frame, what sounds like maybe it takes 2 to 3 years to get all this district portion taken care of. Those are the battles and those are the things that we talk about. And so what ends up happening sometimes is we have to go ahead and we have to put the transformers underground. And that's what causes, is, as Tom says, it cuts the life down quite rapidly on that.
Thank you.
So I'll make a couple comments and just ask some questions. So we were given a memo for this discussion item, and on the first paragraph of page 2 in discussion talks about how the overall cost without this underground tariff, which we've enjoyed with AT&T, the overall cost goes up by 10%. Is that correct? Because I trust Commissioner Aguilash's memory better than I trust my own, and his memory was that it costs a great deal more to not have that AT&T portion. Am I reading this wrong, or is it just the 10% more?
The numbers I think we presented were approximately the $2,000 of the $20,000 we estimate per home. We estimate the cost for AT&T substructure installation, which is the boxes and conduits, be approximately $2,000. Their contribution to that cost. So that would be 10% of the.
So it's 30% when you add the 20 and the 10.
No, that's not right. They're not added. It's a subset.
It's 40,000.
Oh, they're two different
They're
things?
two different things. One is a subset
Okay.
of that. I thought it was interesting just hearing, reading this and hearing the discussion in that we've been under this program for 50 years. And I've never heard one person complain that it looks ugly, that it's been unsuccessful in the areas where we've actually where we have underground districts. I've never heard anyone, never heard a member of the public say, it's too bad that we did that, that was a bad idea, we should stop this immediately. And for 50 years, we spent 2% of revenue to do this program. As I mentioned in a previous item tonight, we haven't done it in a way that benefits every neighborhood or in the same way. And so, and also actually, regardless of the cost, regardless of, we're glad to spend money on doing things a different way when they improve our lives. So the fact, I'm sure there was a lot of complaint when we went from untreated non-Hetch Hetchy water to Hetch Hetchy water, and we had to pay for that. We were obviously getting an improvement in people's quality of lives. When we paved the roads, in this early city's history, there may have been people who said this is a big cost, but generally, we were happy with the results of paving the roads. So I think that we've shown time, we've been able to show time and again that we will pay for things that we value. And I don't see any reason why after 50 years of a successful program that we would want to stop this. We would want to discontinue spending 2% of revenues. As you can probably guess by my comments, I'd be happy to see us spend a higher percent of our revenue, and do more of this, and maybe do it over a quicker period of time. I don't know how much support I'd get, and we can test that theory. But I do see no reason to discontinue this good work, and so it's not up to me. But that's my input, having looked at this for a few years, read the reports, and I don't see any compelling evidence to discontinue this successful program.
May I comment on Commissioner Cook's comment? I think Commissioner Cook's making a very good point. The undergrounding has been done unevenly across the city, and some neighborhoods have benefited from it, and others haven't. And my foggy, not reliable memory of the discussions in 2010 and 2011 are that the difference in proceeding with and without AT&T's financial contribution was substantial. And so I'm scratching my head a little bit over the point that you clarified a minute ago, that AT&T's contribution is only 10% of the total, because that's a pretty small impact on the city's portion and the residents' portion. So if, in fact, that's all that's changed, that we've already undergrounded most of the neighborhoods where we've got AT&T, the benefit of AT&T's 10% contribution, and most of the neighborhoods that remain don't, then I really would like us to look at establishing a policy that has us continuing at whatever pace we decide citywide is prudent to continue. And 100 years to finish the city, isn't a meaningful pace, but we can quibble over whether the goal is to finish it in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. It's expensive, so we're not going to finish it in just a handful of years. It's going to take a long time, but we can still continue it and make progress towards the situation that Commissioner Cook so nicely described. But before going down that path, I would love to have staff more thoughtfully comment on the costs, and of course any of us, thanks to the nice references in the report here, can pull out the 5- and 6-year-old memos where this was last reviewed in detail, because as I say, I have the distinct memory that it was the difference between something being prohibitively expensive and something being doable, and 10% clearly isn't consistent with that memory.
I think, excuse me, but I think one of the things that we were talking about not being doable was trying to do it in a 30-year time frame. We were looking at trying to accelerate at our current pace, which would take 60 to 70 years, and say, what would it take to do it in 30 years?
Mhm.
And so that was covering spending $280 million in 30 years as opposed to spreading it over
Right.
60
So,
years.
so the difference between 30 and 60 or 70 years probably becomes a judgment call and a matter of tactics and something that can benefit a bit from analysis and facts, but ultimately is a political decision that the city council can make in the context of a whole bunch of other priorities. It seems to me that the appropriate topic for this body this evening isn't 30 years versus 60 or 70, but whether we think it's appropriate for the UAC and utility staff to go down some path over the next several months where we can put this issue in front of City Council in a thoughtful and fact-based way that allows them to review it. I think that many people in city government, this is just my own opinion, not fact-based, but my own impression is that many people in city government believe that it's prohibitively expensive and that we should not be pursuing a path of ultimately undergrounding the entire city on any time frame, whether 30 years or 60 or 70 years. And based upon what I'm hearing tonight, it seems like we might want to go down the path where there could be some analysis that says, look, we think it's going to take this many years, but we think we can eventually get there. And based on tonight's discussion, I think that would just be a wonderful contribution for us to make.
I agree. Sorry, I jumped in, but I think that just to add to that, I think that this, as we start to look at the fiber and locations and all that stuff, I think we would be remiss if we didn't also take a look at the undergrounding time frame, because it makes a big difference in terms of the overall cost of the city, and it's a time in which drivers, as I think Commissioner Cook mentioned earlier, are very important in terms of with Google, AT&T, and all the others, as to figure out how much of this is going to be underground and how much is not. I think and even with the city's own fiber system, perhaps that would be the case. I think that we need to bring this back. My sense is this commission needs to receive a presentation and maybe take some action on that within a relatively short amount of time and bring it to the city council for consideration.
There's an interesting question that's triggered by that. My feeling is that the vast majority of what we do here at the UAC is not initiated in the manner we're discussing here, where we decide an issue is important to be brought before the City Council. My sense is that the vast majority of what we do here falls into one of two categories. Either the City Council has asked us to address something and we're responding in a reactive way. And in fact, maybe our City Council member can comment on this in a minute. Or it's an item brought to us by staff, because as part of the normal business of running the utilities department, the UAC has a role to play. Examples would be things like rate design or things like commenting on PPAs for green energy. So what we're talking about doing here, what Commissioner Hall just stated so succinctly, I think would actually be an unusual step for us to take. And maybe it's an appropriate one, maybe it's an inappropriate one. I think we can have that discussion. But it's clearly not the normal way that the UAC contributes to the city. It's clearly not the normal way we interact with the City Council, and it's clearly not the normal way that things get agendized.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that one. That you are absolutely correct about that. In general, the UAC agenda is driven by the CPIU, by the utility department, not by the UAC. This would be a departure from that, although my guess is one that the CPIU would be fine with, I'd say. Having said that, I personally have heard from City Council members over the years that they'd like to see us be a little more proactive and not just reactive. And this is certainly a topic we have heard from the City Council about, or from individual City Council members at our last meeting with them. So,
well, and as a test case to sort of push the point, I find this a particularly attractive one because I think we can offer fact-based recommendations. And I do believe the UAC is at its best when it's operating from the position of facts and analysis rather than opinion. I think it's one of the things that distinguishes the UAC from most of the other city commissions, and I think it's something that the City Council probably values very highly. And so if we're going to push this notion of being more proactive, I find it particularly appealing to be proactive in a case where there'll be a set of economic facts that can help drive our ultimate recommendation, whatever it might turn out to be.
So I think that the scary thing I see in pushing hard on something like this is we're going after aesthetics at the cost of reliability. At the same time, we're pushing to install fiber to the premises so we can have the Internet of Things. So I've got this wonderful Internet of Things at my house. I grew up in Seattle on a street that had undergrounded power. The Columbus Day storm, power went out. It took the utility a week to figure out where. So we had no power for a week. And I had a house with it. My parents had a house with a heat pump, so we truly had no heat. And that's a problem. And with the Internet of Things, now I can't use the medical wonders and so forth. So I think we have to think hard about, if you do underground, how do you underground for 10% more that builds in all the telemetry so you can localize the fault and figure out where, okay, there it is, I know right where to go, or I don't know, all the transformer wells have pumps. But somehow it may cost more, but if you do underground, it can't be aesthetics at the cost of reliability, and we want the Internet of Things. That doesn't add up well to me. So that's
I think I agree with Commissioner Ballantyne there, because there's an interesting opportunity here, because several of the things that we're studying are all coming together, and so the rationale for doing it in the past doesn't apply in the same way now, because now we have these other things we want to do. And I actually do think if you did a referendum or something like that where you ask people which of these things would you rather have, they might rather have the added reliability, the ability to have more information, the Internet of Things, and the fiber might be something that would be more appealing to them than paying $2,000 for their share to have it go under the wire, to go underground. So I think that it may just be that there are some different things at play, even though the rationale in the past had one level of emphasis, there may be a different level of emphasis now.
So there probably is room for new thinking or different ideas. And, for example, maybe the consumer's share should be higher, but it would be the charge on the utility bill that gets paid over 20 years and runs with the property. And maybe they're paying half of it that way, because it does increase property values to have. I haven't had the experience that Mr. Ballantyne has had, but it does. It's one of the reasons we bought in our neighborhood. We appreciated the aesthetics is very nice.
And there have not been reliability issues.
Well, no big storms, but
right.
Yeah, but what to be seen whether we get
anecdotal so far.
No LSOs either.
But another.
I'm pretty sure underground keeps
other ideas. If it was consumers who had to pay a higher percentage for the tariff on their property, maybe you put it out where neighborhoods or blocks could apply, or could take votes on, and you approach things in the order of who sticks their hand up first. These are just random ideas. Mm-hmm. Other people would come up with better ideas, but putting some attention on it might yield different approaches to the problem.
So that was one of the purposes we had of trying to establish a citizens committee, to look at all the different ideas of how do we pay extra, how are we going to pay the extra cost of doing this or accelerating the process.
So may I just ask whose idea it was to create a citizens committee?
It came from the UAC.
Okay.
We presented to the finance committee. They approved of the idea. Okay. We presented it to the council.
And what was the objection?
Council said no.
Council said no.
When was that?
That was in 2013.
2013. Okay.
And that was a 5-4 vote.
Yes.
So it could be different now.
Could be different now.
Right, so exactly.
Well, I have a process question.
Sure.
Maybe it's loaded with a thought of how to go forward, but just a question. What if the UAC indicated that some or all of us are interested in exploring this again? That doesn't prejudge in any shape or form whether we all collectively, when we finally do decide, will think it's a great idea and we need to recommend it on, but it may or may not. But if the city council were willing to, or the director of utilities were willing to sponsor that activity, we could go forward and have a more or less along the way that Commissioner Cook and Commissioner English indicated, have a more in-depth discussion on it, potentially coming to a recommendation to City Council as to whether we think this is worth another look, and because the context is changing. And I'm just throwing that as a possibility in terms of process.
You know, as we discuss process, maybe we also want to turn to the interim director and assistant director? Is that your title?
It's actually interim director and assistant city manager.
No, I want
assistant director.
Assistant director, if you wanted, any of you. Okay, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people here from our fine utilities department. If any of you wanted to comment, you know, having heard this discussion, your thoughts on the path forward.
Well, let me reinforce the open invitation for staff to weigh in. You know, again, for myself, I feel like I'm walking into the middle of a conversation, while it may be over the course of the last 5 years. So that said, I really do think it's important for staff to weigh in on how best to structure the follow-up that might come out of this discussion. Personally, I found it very enlightening, and I think it could lead to some good areas for additional work and report back, and again, perhaps involving a tour or two of the facility, so the commissioners could get a better sense of some of the practical implications of the systems we're discussing. Jane, Dean, Tom?
I did want to address Commissioner Ballantyne's comments. There is another initiative, the Smart Grid initiative, that we're working on to try to not only look at installation of smart meters, but what can we do on what can we do with our distribution system for sensing, troubleshooting, things like that, to help us identify problems much quicker and where they're looking.
Let's see, we've got a request to make a comment, which I think we can accommodate. Do we have to do a comment card, or we can skip that? Or come on up, go ahead.
I guess on the information that you've received, you need to go back many years to restate the economic information. That is, in the past, I don't know how it is now in capital improvement program in the budget, but in the past, the amount of money that was shown was just essentially replacing the poles with an underground structure. And that was shared, and that was the way the dollar division was told. And they said it was 60% for the city and 40% for AT&T plus cable co-op, which is 20% each. But then all the equipment is extra. So you have to see the numbers presented that way. The second thing is that the 2% that the utilities is included in their budgets, and no one has ever decided that it should be a different number or had a policy discussion on that, was for both doing new undergrounding and for replacing old undergrounding. And the first time that a city came through and did that, it was in the city manager June Fleming's neighborhood. And then they went on for 10 years postponing scheduled undergrounding in neighborhoods in South Palo Alto. As I recall, one in Midtown, west of Middlefield, was the one that was next in line, but no, they had to do all of that. And also the number of years that we're told that undergrounding's useful life is before needing to be replaced changes. We used to hear 30 years, and we say, oh no, it's better now, it's 40 years better equipment. And in fact, in the Hewlett subdivision, which is above Arrastradero Preserve, between Foothills Park and Arrastradero Preserve, originally that undergrounding was put in when the subdivision was done, so it was the cost of the subdivider. And that was 30 years ago, but the CIP said, oh, it's been 40 years. I said, well, if it's 40 years, we got to do it. So it's the way I would pose it would be just the opposite of Commissioner Donahoe, and that would say what we should spend the money for is taking all of the underground and make it overhead. And see whether anybody complains. After all, they have unreliable undergrounding. So one thing, if it's necessary to do both replacement and new ones, that means it may make more sense to have different line items in the budget and have, whether it's 2% or some other number, for the new undergrounding districts, and have extra money that will need to be justified for the replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback?
I'm looking at the time.
Time to roll. Okay. Thanks very much,
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the staff recommendation on the power purchase agreement.
Now we have Senior Resource Planner Jim Stack to give the presentation on this. You've seen Jim provide you a preliminary assessment of the results of the RFP, and so now we are done with that process. We have a contract.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. So I'm here tonight to talk about, I'm Jim Stack, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about a power purchase agreement for renewable power. So in order to meet the city's and the state's aggressive renewable energy procurement goals, including the carbon neutral goal, staff issued an RFP last spring, and as Assistant Director Ratchey mentioned, I gave you a presentation back in July on kind of the preliminary results of that RFP, and I'm here tonight to give you the outcome of that process, including the contract itself. So I'll talk a little bit about the RFP again. I'll go in through the details of the project that we selected and the PPA terms we negotiated. I'll talk a little bit about the risks that are inherent in contracts like this and mitigation measures we've negotiated to address those risks. Then I'll show you how the project will fit into the portfolio if it's approved, and I'll give you our final recommendation. So to get into the RFP, this slide shows a graph of a year-by-year look at our procurement of renewables, the volume of renewable energy we've procured starting in 2003 and going out about 35 years. You can see that starting in 2015, we had some of our first solar projects come online. As Director Shikata mentioned in his report, our second large-scale solar project just came online a few weeks ago. We also have 3 more expected to be completed later this year. So over the course of 12 months or so, the amount of solar in our portfolio is going to ramp up dramatically and get us to above the 50% RPS level. But looking out a few years, in 2021, one of our older kind of legacy renewable contracts, a wind contract we signed over a decade ago, is set to expire. And when that happens, then a few years later, we have some other contracts expiring. That's going to leave us with a little bit of a gap from where we need to be to maintain our carbon neutral portfolio and to maintain the 50% RPS level that the state's requiring. So we did an RFP. That's one of the 2 primary motivators of the RFP, was addressing that gap. So as a result, we were looking for contracts that would start delivering to us in 2021. The second...
Can I just ask a question? I think it may be easier now. It's a really simple question. So we got the small hydro, but Calaveras is a different animal, right? That's a lot bigger than a small hydro. The small hydro, can you just define what it is?
Sure. The Calaveras project actually consists of 2 different sort of facilities. There's a large powerhouse called the Collierville Powerhouse, and there's a smaller facility called New Spicer. And the state defines RPS small hydro, which is eligible under the RPS standards, as facilities that are smaller than 30 megawatts. Mm-hmm. So the smaller portion of Calaveras, those 2 facilities, actually counts towards the RPS requirements. So and there's a little bit coming from our Central Valley project resources as well. Some of those smaller dams are RPS eligible.
Okay. So behind the scenes here is the large Calaveras project. It hasn't gone away.
Right. That's exactly right.
And the Western.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not shown. It's just the RPS eligible resources that are shown here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Well, but maybe in case anyone else has the question, maybe you could state explicitly. what does the RPS need to be here for us to have a 100% carbon neutral electric portfolio because of the large hydro not shown here?
Sure. So under average hydro conditions in a typical average year, we get about 50% of our total supply from hydro, including the small hydro, which is about 1% of that. So if you add basically 50% to this, to the resources shown here, we basically need to get to the 50% RPS line on this graph in order to get to carbon neutral overall, assuming average conditions for hydro.
One other question. What are your projections for future use? Specifically, what if we have 2,000 or 3,000 more electric cars by 2021? How much does that drive up our consumption?
We factor that number into our long-term load forecasts. We do factor in, an increase in the amount of EVs we see in the city. We're also factoring in an increased penetration of rooftop solar, which drives down our load.
I think that's an incorrect assumption in any material way. I don't think we're going to get a very high penetration of rooftop solar here because it's not economic relative to the solar that the utility department provides.
I think our forecast is assuming that we're going to meet our local solar plan goal,
or something.
which is a total of 4%.
Okay.
So you're right, it's not huge.
Do you remember how big an increase in EVs you're assuming?
I can't remember offhand what percentage.
It's not really that big. Remember that our load is 85% commercial.
Okay. That's right, we had this discussion before.
Residential.
Okay.
So
and the EVs would charge at night. Well,
I actually have new opinions about that. Now that
Yes.
I have an EV, I have a different attitude about that. That when you
the
do it.
50% RPS line does go up, so we are showing an increase in load.
So the second major driver of the RFP last year that we issued was the Federal Investment Tax Credit, or the ITC. At the time we issued the RFP, the investment tax credit, which is a benefit to the developers of solar projects that is equivalent to, it's a tax credit equivalent to 30% of the total capital cost of the project. So that benefit is pretty substantial. It drives down the price of these projects that utilities have to pay quite a bit. And when we issued the RFP last spring, that ITC was scheduled to drop from 30% down to 10% at the end of this year. So we issued an RFP in 2015 for projects that would start delivering in 2021, thinking that some of those projects we would receive under the RFP would be built in 2016 and capture that 30% ITC and be able to give us a lower contract price. And they would deliver their energy to somebody else for a few years before starting delivering to us in 2021.
So given that the ITC has just been extended, how does that change the calculus?
Get to that.
Yeah. Those are the two major factors that motivated us to issue an RFP in 2015 for 2021 deliveries. So this slide gives you a quick overview of the results of our RFP. I presented this earlier. But we were looking for projects that would deliver 30 to 80 gigawatt hours per year, or 3 to 8% of our city's load, starting in 2021. Got a pretty good response. Over 40 projects were proposed to us. 80% of those were solar, a handful of wind and other items. This slide kind of describes the criteria we used to evaluate all these proposals we got. The number one criteria we looked at was the price, or the total value to the city of the project, and the metric we used is the green premium, which represents the incremental cost of the renewable energy project relative to a non-renewable project of similar attributes. The second major criterion we looked at was the viability of the project, or the likelihood that the project would get built and delivered to us as proposed, and I list a few of the factors here that went into that metric. The next slide is a graph showing kind of the overall results of the RFP, all the proposals we received in terms of the green premium. This shows kind of the broad range of responses we got in terms of the prices. There's obviously a very large range for the solar projects there, but of all the projects we received, The top kind of 5 or 10% were all solar projects, and they were all priced very attractively. All of them were lower than the prices of any previous solar contract we've executed. And I highlight there at the bottom the project we ultimately selected as the finalist is the lowest price, or the lowest green premium of all the projects we received. So with that, I will jump into the kind of the key attributes of the project we chose.
Sorry to interrupt you. I know you're doing great and in such a nice rhythm, but I'm going to just stop you back on the price slide again. So we talked, and I guess we'll talk about ITC and expiring and all that in a moment. But at some point, I'd like to come back to this chart and have you give us some idea whether you decided to reject the second or third finalist for other reasons other than the cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because it appears to me that there at least there's an argument to be made, maybe not a winning one, but an argument to be made that the window of opportunity is best now than it has ever been, and may be for the rest of for a very long period of time.
What are you asking? You're asking about buying more than we need?
Yeah, no more than we need. Because if you look back at the chart, where I don't want to go back to the one where I asked the Calaveras question, you have a plateau and then you start to drop off as contracts expire. It's not all that far out before we start having contracts started to drop off. And so, yeah, a little bit more than we need right now. But by the time you built it out, you're starting to anticipate the drop off in the mid 20.
And if
Yeah, 2020, mid 2020s. Yeah. So
This is going to be a long-term contract. You'll see a new chart with this, with the new.
All right. All right. I shall wait.
Okay. So here are the high-level details of the contract we're bringing to you tonight. The project is informally known as the Wilsona Solar Project. The counterparty to the contract is Hecate Energy Palo Alto, LLC, which is so named because it's developed by Hecate Energy. And I should mention there's a representative from Hecate here tonight. Nicholas Bullinger is the COO of Hecate. He came out from Nashville for the meeting tonight, so I wanted to acknowledge him.
Whose panels are quoted?
Sorry?
Whose panels are quoted?
I don't think the panels haven't been selected, I don't think, at this point.
The panels haven't been selected.
2021. I'll tell you in 2020.
Got it. Do we have to approve their, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Sure.
Do we have to approve their choice of panel manufacturer?
No. We're getting a PPA. We're not buying that. That's not our business.
Right, so they have all the risk. Got it. Thank you.
So the number that stands out for me on this slide here would be the price, $36.76 per megawatt hour, which is a flat price, doesn't escalate over the contract term, which is kind of a startlingly low price. It's lower than any solar contract price in the U.S. that I've ever seen published. So it's fairly significant. It's almost 50% lower than the prices of any of our previous solar PPAs, all of which we thought were pretty attractive when we signed them. It's a 26 megawatt project. It will deliver about 7.5% of the city's total load. The contract term is a 25-year base term with 3 additional 5-year extension term options that the city can exercise in its sole discretion that could take it out to 40 years. It will start delivering in June of 2021. That's expected, which is right when the wind contract expires. It's supposed to be built in the Palmdale area in LA County. It will provide to us system capacity credit. It'll be fully deliverable. It's not expected to be built in a local capacity area, but the system capacity is still valuable to us. Sure. The independent system operator, the ISO, gives all load-serving entities like Palo Alto certain reliability standards that we have to meet by procuring a product called resource adequacy. So aside from the energy, we also have to procure a certain amount of capacity to provide grid reliability. And we have to procure a certain amount of that that's called system capacity, which can be anywhere in the ISO system, just capacity built anywhere. And then there's a subset of that, a different kind of product we also have to procure called local capacity. And that is a certain kind of capacity that's built in certain kind of load-constrained areas, like the Bay Area, where there's not enough capacity, and they're trying to incentivize building more capacity in those areas.
So if because of the duck curve, there's too much solar at a given time and there has to be curtailment, how does that play out? I mean, what do we have to pay for it even if we can't get it because the transmission's curtailed?
Well, that's kind of a separate discussion from the capacity issue, but curtailment is obviously something that people are thinking about with solar as more and more gets built out. In this particular contract, we get a certain amount of free curtailment hours every year. 50 hours are hours that we can curtail the project, and we do not have to pay for the energy that has been curtailed and that could have been delivered. In typical contracts, you have to pay for all the energy that gets curtailed because of for economic reasons, because there's too much energy being built.
So we won't have to pay in this contract?
For the first 50 hours. Beyond that, if we have to do a large amount of curtailments over the course of a given contract year, we will have to pay for all of the energy beyond the first 50 hours. At the same contract price, yes.
In a given year or for the whole course of the project?
It's 50 hours per year.
Per
That's
year.
given up to us for free. In contrast to many of the other solar project proposals we received under the RFP, which were planned to be built in 2016 in order to capture that 30% ITC, this project was actually proposed to us to be built, in 2020 or 2021, specifically to meet our need in 2021. And as such, given the online data so far into the future, the project isn't terribly far along on the development process. Currently, they have site control, but I don't believe they've started the permitting process or applied for interconnection or things of that nature. But they do have 5+ years to take care of those issues, so we're not too concerned about that. Another nice feature of the contract is that it provides us the ability to add a storage facility on the site of the project at any point in time that we request that it be built. They'll have land set aside specifically for that, and Hecate actually does have a good amount of experience developing storage projects for other utilities. I think they have a contract with PG&E right now in California.
That could help address some of the flex capacity and duct curve issues.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So now on to some of the risks. In any PPA, any long-term contract like this, there are several risks, including counterparty credit risk, which is the risk that the counterparty could go bankrupt at some point during the contract term. And to address that risk, PPA structures are such that we only pay for the energy after it's delivered to us. We don't have to put down any capital up front. The developer bears all the development risk. The next risk is the development risk, which is the risk that the project never gets built for some reason, if they cannot get financing or if permitting becomes too difficult for them, and they pull the plug on this. And to address that, what we negotiated into this contract is that the developer will put down a $5.2 million deposit right after we sign the contract. The city gets to hang on to those funds, and in the event that the project never gets built or gets built a year or so late relative to the timeline that is in the contract, we get to retain all that money. So that's a pretty hefty amount of insurance against that risk. It's almost 3 times larger than the development assurances we've had in any of our previous contracts.
What about transmission congestion risks, since this is south of Path 15?
Transmission risk is just something that.
So that if the power can't get to us because of congestion, what protections do we have, or did that get considered, or?
Well, the power doesn't have to technically get from LA up to here. It just has to get delivered onto the grid. So it just goes into the grid, and wherever it is needed, it'll go, and we get credit for that.
So it doesn't have to be scheduled to be, because my understanding was that if it was really our power, that it had to be scheduled to get up here, that it wasn't just a handoff that we get.
No, it's under the ISO system. It's really kind of it's more or less a financial market where our load here in Palo Alto receives energy from the ISO, and we pay a certain price for that, a Palo Alto price, and all of our.
Well,
yeah.
But if you got into a weird hypothetical where Bay Area load went up by 10 times and LA area load didn't, you could create a bottleneck where truly the power had to move from down there to up here. Right.
Sure.
I mean, today it's kind of like this big thing, all these AC sources in parallel, and it all works out because frequency and voltage all match. And right. But in a weird case where in the next 5 years there's tremendous growth here and not in LA, I guess you could imagine that you might have a bottleneck. That problem exists in New York.
Okay.
Is that?
Upgrade the grid.
If something like that happened, it probably wouldn't happen suddenly.
Yeah.
Someone would address it.
No, but I mean, I think isn't it part of the issue that's happening with the duck curve that you're going to get what happens when you get overcapacity at a time of day when you don't need it, and then you don't have the power during the time of day when you do need it.
I think that would play out through an impact on market prices.
Yeah.
So all of our resources around the state, they receive independent prices based on where they are and how much congestion is at that project location and how much congestion it faces to get that energy to where it's needed. So if there is an overcapacity area, you'd start to see prices drop for the energy that's being produced there, and it could go negative. And that's when you'd start to see the curtailment coming into play.
Let me ask if Deborah Lloyd would like to weigh in.
One of my favorite subjects, market design. So the California Independent System Operator, has their transmission planning process. So they're looking exactly for things. If there's a sudden swing between north and south, there will be transmission built to address those reliability requirements. Those are the sort of projects that will be large grid-related projects that everyone gets to pay for in the system. The particular situation you said where there might be congestion going from south to north, in that case what would happen is that our load would be paying a higher rate based on where our load is located. So we pay this kind of load aggregation price that's based on northern area where we are located. Our resource gets paid where it is generating. And so that congestion shows between the difference in cost between what our generation gets paid and what our load has to pay. And then there, like I said, it's a financial settlement, so there are also these congestion revenue rights that we can try and purchase to hedge against the difference between where our resource is and where our load is paying. So there's, these are issues that I know that when I've worked with the front office, they've been looking a lot at the congestion revenue rights, where that might be going, the forecast for what load pays in this area. So these are, this is kind of like the planning process. And like I said, the California Independent System Operator is constantly looking at grid design to maintain reliability on the system. The duck curve is another issue. It's something that happens at just at certain hours of the year. And obviously it's going to be an issue with solar, but I think certainly storage possibilities would address that.
But it would been my understanding that we hadn't been looking at any storage options. We
have been looking at them a lot.
Oh, okay.
But nothing's remotely cost effective yet. But if the duck curve really starts going down, and we can't solve it with flex capacity products that we're going to be required to buy. It'll probably start making more and more sense, and as the price falls.
Another risk in PPAs is performance risk, which is the risk that after the project gets built, its performance starts to deteriorate and it's not maintained properly. And to deal with that, we have liquidated damages provisions in the PPA, where if the performance falls below a certain threshold, we assess damages to the project owner. And the developer also has to put down another performance or another deposit called the performance assurance. That's equal to $2.6 million, which we hang on to through the life of the contract after it achieves operations. And we can call on that money if we need to cover the liquidated damages. The final risk is simply that the risk that future projects could be more attractive to us than this one, which is a risk inherent to any forward purchase that you make. Can't do much to mitigate that. So this next slide shows the earlier slide of our renewable purchases going into the future, with the Wilsona PPA shown in kind of the light orange bars there at the top of the graph.
I withdraw my earlier question.
Yes, you can see that with the addition of this PPA, it would take us above the 50% and above the carbon neutral threshold until about 2029.
Yeah, that's way out there.
Which is pretty far out there, yeah. And who knows what solar prices and renewable prices will be at that point. So that is how the portfolio looks with this contract. My next slide talks about the potential surplus position that exists. As you can see, with this project in there, that adds a few more years where we could be above that carbon neutral line, which means we might have surplus renewable supplies to deal with for a handful of years. And that situation exists only if hydro production is pretty good, average or better, which we haven't been seeing a lot of lately. And it also only exists if all of our renewables projects that are under contract, plus this one, actually get built according to the size and timeline that are proposed. But anyway, if that surplus position situation were to play out, we could pretty easily sell the surplus energy on the spot market or in a forward market. We could sell the energy with the RECs, or we could hang on to the RECs ourselves and bank them for future use. So there are options to deal with that situation if it exists. The next slide shows how the variability of the hydro resources affects the portfolio. This slide shows even with the Wilsona PPA in the portfolio, in a dry year, we could still have to go out and purchase RECs to achieve carbon neutrality. We could have a deficit. In an average year or a wet year, we could have some surplus energy to sell. But that's a situation we face already in certain months when we have a lot of hydro deliveries. The next slide is a table showing our renewable portfolio. It shows the operating projects and the committed projects, which altogether get us to an RPS level of about 50% once we remove the wind project that's going to be expiring in 2021. And if you add on the Wilsona project, that'll get us to an RPS level of 58%. The right column shows the green premium of all the projects when you add them up together, because we have the LEAP requirement that our total renewable purchases not cause our rates to go up by more than 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So with the existing projects in our portfolio, minus the wind project, the rate impact is about 0.25 cents per kilowatt hour, but the Wilsona PPA is priced so low that it's actually lower than our long-term projection of where the non-renewable market will be. So it has a negative green premium, which cuts the total green premium down to 0.12 cents per kilowatt hour. And now to circle back to the investment tax credit issue, which, as Commissioner Schwartz mentioned earlier, it got extended just a few weeks ago by Congress, rather unexpectedly. At the end of the year, they passed a fairly long-term extension of it. such that instead of cutting down to 10% at the end of 2016, now projects that start construction by the end of 2019 can still take advantage of the 30% tax credit, and then it drops down to 26% the following year and 22% the year after that before going down to 10. So given that Hecate was originally planning to develop a project in 2020 or 2021, this represents a pretty significant benefit to them. It certainly improves the viability of the project from our standpoint. But after this extension was passed, we were wrapping up negotiations on this contract, but we did make a request that Hecate reduce the contract price to reflect this the increase in the extension of the tax credit. But they declined that request because the margins were already so low at this price. However, that does raise the issue. The extension of the tax credit combined with the passage of SB 350, the 50% RPS law, which happened last summer, both of those policy changes came about after we issued the RFP, so that represents a pretty significant change in the landscape for renewables in California. And given that the contract is planned to start in 2021, this does create the possibility that we could scrap this contract and go out with another RFP in a few years, do an RFP in 2018 or 19 for a contract that could still take advantage of the 30% tax credit and come out with a pretty good price. Although at that point, prices could be higher or lower. It's a bit of a gamble. We don't know what solar contract or solar costs or other costs are going to do. At that point, the other utilities in California will be out trying to contract for their needs for the 50% RPS law. So it's certainly a gamble. And with a price this low, we don't recommend taking that gamble. So with that, it's just in summary, it's an exceptionally low contract price, a price that certainly surprised us. There's a $5.2 million development security that provides very good insurance, minimizes the downside risk. On the other hand, there is the possibility that we could start over with another RFP in a few years and take our chances on the market at that point. But our recommendation is to approve the current PPA with Hecate and delegate to the city manager the execution authority, waive the investment grade credit rating requirement of the Muni Code, which is pretty standard for our renewable PPAs, and also waive the anti-speculation provision of the risk management policy because of the surplus position that could exist with this contract.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for just a moment, since you've come all this way to come join us, if you could come on up and say a few words about your company, if you would, and its background and all that kind of good stuff. And also, who are your investors? Are you have to name them specifically, domestic investors, foreign investors? Are you owned by a Chinese panel manufacturer or anything like that?
We're not. Well, thank you. Actually, the meeting's been very educational for me so far as well, so I've learned a lot. I'm Nick Bullinger. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Hecate Energy. We're based in Nashville. I actually reside in Minneapolis. Our company is relatively young. We've been around for about 3.5 years, but our leadership team's been working together now for about 15 years. We've sold our company a couple of times, and so we've gone through name changes. But our current company is focused on power development, not just solar, but also energy storage, wind, natural gas. That's actually how our company started about 15 years ago, was a natural gas power plant development, mainly in the northeast of the United States. We currently focus internationally as well, so we're not just a U.S. company. We do a lot of work with cities. We happen to, I think, make good long-term partners for cities. So we work with the city of Houston. They actually just awarded us a 30-megawatt project. It's also built rather far from the city. Texas, ERCOT faces the same type of congestion issues, and they ask the same types of questions about how to handle congestion risk on a project that's not located right next to the city. We work with the city of East Providence in Rhode Island. We work with Cleveland in Ohio, and Athens, Ohio. So we do a lot of work with cities. We're privately funded, so we're self-funded. We don't have outside investments, outside investors. At the project level, we bring in project equity. And
I was going to say,
debt.
there's equity, tax equity, debt, that all comes from
Correct.
outside sources, okay.
Correct. Or you wouldn't necessarily need to utilize tax equity if you wanted to use other financing instruments that a municipality would make available.
Okay.
That's one reason our initial bid price, we did assume an extension of investment tax credit, and certainly not a cliff on investment tax credit, but some sort of gradual wind down. But there's also other instruments available for financing that aren't just tax credits. So we were comfortable with our bid price if we didn't receive an extension. I don't know that everyone thought it was going to be 30% the full extension, but we were comfortable that we could hold bid price under any scenario we were facing. But we're self-funded. We project finance each project, so it has its own set of investors. Typically, the equity investor would be either our company or another independent power producer. And there's a lot of those around. Big solar companies are just big power companies. A lot of the big regulated utilities have deregulated subsidiaries or entities that will invest in projects. Tax equity investors tend to be either utilities or banks that can pull together a lot of tax equity appetite, and then the debt comes from typical sources you would think of for debt for large projects, such as a bank.
Have you done projects in California before?
Yep, we have. We were selected by the city of Los Angeles to fulfill 192 megawatts. 160 of those megawatts, 162 of those megawatts are 3 large projects, each about 50 megawatts in size, being built outside of the city, and then 28 of those megawatts are being built on a lot of different rooftops and parking lots within the city of Los Angeles.
And you mentioned the company's been sold several times. Who is the current owner of the company?
Well, we are the current owner of this company. Our last company was a company that was purchased by a Korean firm. We at the time were called OCI Solar Power, and we entered into a 400 megawatt power purchase agreement with the city of San Antonio, which at that time, I think probably still is the largest PPA ever entered into in the United States.
So you're saying the current management of the company owns the company?
Team, correct.
Okay, got it.
That's right. So we reincarnated as we've sold our company a couple different times.
Sounds good. Other questions?
Just a real quickie, this wouldn't really affect economics and all that, and the city is well protected if something happens, but you haven't started the permitting, CEQA. Is anything like desert tortoise or any issues like that, endangered species that you may have to encounter in that area?
Not on this project, and it's a significant issue, and I used to laugh about it until I had 3 sites with turtles on them or tortoises on them. And it's no laughing matter. It makes development very difficult. This site is actually well advantaged. That's one of the reasons that and I understand that the commission needs to make a decision, but just purely objectively, the site itself has a lot of advantages. One is that it's disturbed agriculture land already, so the zoning, which can be difficult, is already essentially taken care of. And secondly, it's located, and this gets to a lot of the strategies that the utility will use. If you want to hedge congestion risk, you seem to have a diversified portfolio, and so you may actually you may be in a good position congestion-wise, actually, and diversified resources allow you to make good decisions on how to hedge or if to hedge. But it's located very close. We'll interconnect to a 69 kV line. You can think of that for those of you that may not be as familiar with the utility industry, although I notice most of you are very well versed in the utility industry. That's probably why you're on this commission. But you're also the project hooks in very nicely to some high voltage lines. So the site is a great site for any kind of power production or storage, the capturing of energy if you want to do that at some point. So the site itself has a lot of advantages. Land is a scarce resource. I think you probably know that better living in California than I do living in Minnesota. But for power development, land is a scarce resource. Transmission is a scarce resource. So it's not a continually downward sloping curve by any stretch of the imagination. Certain aspects, I think, will continue. We'll see 10 to 15% improvements in EPC costs without a doubt. We modeled that. I'm sure everyone else that bid has modeled their own assumptions for it. But there's also costs that go up over time. And that's why if you look at the forward price curve, the forecast for electricity prices, it's much below the price this project was bid at and will be contracted at. So whether there's congestion risk or a lower price later in and of itself, just objectively this project is below what future electricity prices are forecast for in the state of California. And I think you take good comfort in that.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, other comments, questions?
Tim, thank you for a very thorough presentation. Department's done a very good job on this. My questions for that as well.
Thank you.
So I have a motion to accept staff.
Wait, were you about to make a motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I do recognize that it's late and we still have a lot of items on the agenda, but I had at least a couple of brief questions, and I think James probably did too. James can't let any solar deal. It's actually in his job description because he works for a solar company. Should I go ahead? Why did you decide to, can you help remind us, why did the city decide to do this RFP now? Because we don't need the power for several years.
Our thinking was largely motivated by price. We did see a need.
Meaning you thought the timing was particularly?
At the expected
You explained it on
expiration
slide
of the ITC.
Right, yeah, because the ITC was set to drop down from 30 to 10.
Right, so we thought now was a sort of magical moment in time.
Plus
Yeah.
other utilities starting to contract for more
Right.
later, down closer to 2021.
Right.
The prices might rise quite a bit.
Right. So first of all, I wanted to thank you and the entire utilities staff for a great job. And, we so quickly end up talking about the trees when we have these PPAs in front of us. And I guess I wanted to take a minute to step back to the forest for an extra charge to our ratepayers that's truly in the noise, right? That's truly less than a latte per month. You and your colleagues have managed our renewable portfolio in such a way that despite not living in the Pacific Northwest where it's easy to get 100% of your electricity from hydro, we have a zero carbon portfolio. And it is just a real testament to the work that you and your colleagues have done over a very long period of time. And so, on behalf of all 50,000 of us, plus the businesses that use most of our electricity here, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do note that in the more distant future, we're heading towards a time where we're not going to have diversity of sources. We're adding more solar, and we're going to be losing our wind and landfill gas. And so at some point, we're going to want to think about the question of diversity. We're going to want to think about whether maybe storage has gotten cheap enough at that time to give us some of the same advantages that diversity of generation would give us. But I don't see that as a problem now. I see that as a problem it's a decade or more away before we need to worry about it. So I'm not in the least concerned with adding more solar now. But 10 or 15 years from now, a lot will have changed. We may have a smarter grid in those days. We may have storage. I guess I also wanted to comment on how remarkable I thought it was that you included a slide called Alternatives to Approval. I have no recollection of ever seeing such a slide that's so directly acknowledged that it.
Jane's idea.
Well, yay, Jane. I mean, I think it represents a degree of intellectual honesty that's really commendable, and it makes our job so much easier to have you help us to frame the arguments on both sides. I think you've also done a nice job of addressing the question that might have occurred to many of us. gee, the price is so low. Is it too low to be credible? And of course, you address that in a thoughtful way around risk. But then when we remember the timing of this, when we remember that this isn't going to be built for several years, I think that helps to explain why the price is so low. And I think the developer is making a set of assumptions about the future, as are we. And based on those assumptions, this is going to turn out to be a good business deal for them and for us. And that's, of course, what we want and expect. And so that's how I've gotten my own head around the fact that it's really a remarkably low price. It's a remarkably low price several years from now, and they've made some assumptions about prices of panels and all kinds of other things in believing that they're going to make money on this. I'm sure that they're not considering this a philanthropic activity. You don't do philanthropy, do you? Right. Like the old joke, we didn't plan to be a nonprofit, it just turned out. Yeah, so that's how I've gotten my own head around feeling comfortable with this. So sorry for taking up time so late at night, but I guess I wanted to share those thoughts with everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah, I totally agree. Congratulations to you all, and then congratulations on getting to this point. Where we are with the city. It really is phenomenal to get this small of a rate impact, and we were allowing a much larger one. 3 or 4 times the size of the one that you've engineered. I just have one question, which is that with the development at such an early stage, I think you've done a great job in making sure that we're protected with the development security. But is there any sort of outs or any changes in price that can be triggered by, for example, the developer applies for an interconnection position, the studies come back and show that the interconnection costs are extremely high, unusually high, and wouldn't make the project financially viable. Does the price change, or is there any consideration of that in the contract?
We haven't included provisions for adjustments in price based on development costs. Currently, the developer bears that risk. There is flexibility in the PPA for the developer to change the site if certain significant problems like that occur with a particular location they've chosen right now. So we give them flexibility for that. Other than that, there are some milestones they have to meet, getting permitting done by a certain date and interconnection by a certain date. And ultimately, there are some off-ramps if, the construction doesn't start by a certain date. We do have the ability to get out of the contract if it, starts looking like it's not realistic to get done according to the timeline.
Okay, great. Well, very, very well done. Congratulations. Thanks.
Anything else? Okay. In that case, I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation. I will not read the entire thing. Everyone's got it here. Anyone want to take that? Second by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thanks very much, everyone.
That's John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Congratulations to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is the solar hot water heating program.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Solar hot water heating. Hang on, I'm going to find the memo here. Thank you. Yep, item number 4. And what this is, let's see. Ed or Jane, did you want to say anything about this? I realize this was placed here just so we had the opportunity to discuss it back to our agenda setting discussion. And so we will do that, but if you do want to say anything about it first, by all means.
No, I really don't. I mean, this was requested last time. We put it in the agenda as an informational item, and then you indicated that you wanted to actually discuss the item, and so
Right.
here it is on the agenda.
Commissioner Valentine, I think you were the one who raised this. I will say, I long before you joined the UAC, I had raised a similar issue. Solar hot water heating has been very successful in some parts of the world, China in particular, I'm aware of, and has been a dismal failure
Israel.
Oh, Israel as well, okay. And has been a dismal failure. Yeah, but for some reason we can't seem to figure it out here, and I don't think, it's not figured out, it's probably the wrong term. I assume it must have something to do with some combination of low natural gas prices, but also probably high cost of installation. I'm sort of suspecting, my guess is somehow in China they managed to install these things at lower cost than we do. That probably sort of a statement of the obvious. But, and obviously low demand means it's sort of an ad hoc thing. I wonder, Jane, what was the program we did last year? Was it Solar Share, or what was it called? Where we partnered with various cities and drove down the cost of solar PV.
Solar PV.
Solar
yeah.
PV, but what was that program called?
The Peninsula Sun Shares.
Thank you, Sun Shares. I knew it had the word shares in it. You know, I'm just wondering whether a program like, in other words, how many systems have been installed? What's the number? It's
43.
43. I mean, over some enormous period of time. So, I mean, these things are obviously done very much one at a time, ad hoc, highest possible cost. So it does occur to me whether some kind of collective buy kind of thing could drive down the price enough to make it interesting, whether it would truly be cost effective from a, return on investment perspective. Who knows? On the other hand, hundreds and hundreds of people have purchased rooftop solar PV systems that are still only marginally attractive from a return on investment point of view.
Do you know if the people, the 43 families that have these really like them or not? Have you done any follow-up to them? If they're happy with them?
I don't know that much about this program. I put this on for your discussion. We tried to not spend much time preparing this. This is not on our work plan. And so if you have questions and issues, I can bring the expert on this program back to talk to you about it.
Who is that person?
Lindsay Joy.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, too, that we did have, in the early 1980s, a pretty much the same kind of thing as Peninsula Sun Shares for solar hot water heating program. So
Right.
we had a bulk buy program that was very successful, and we had lots of these installed in the city during that time, and now they're pretty much dead. These systems.
As in they don't work anymore, or they've passed their useful life?
I think there are probably a few that still limp along and work, but they've been on the roof for 25 to 30 years now.
Right.
But it was a good program, but things have changed. It was kind of more low tech back then and relatively cheap to do. But
so one of the when I was in Colombia, there was a group that I was really impressed with. That was a company that was doing solar hot water as one of the things that they were offering. They were setting things up so that they could do it at the house could be a standalone, the house could be interconnected to the grid, and they're coming back in March. They're going to be back in town. I met with them right after when I met them, they were then coming to Palo Alto, and so or to the Bay Area, and so they came down to Palo Alto, and I met with them. And would it be all right to put them in touch with somebody at the utility to talk to? Because they have a really nicely packaged solution that looks elegant, and they've had very good success with it in Colombia, and it might be just interesting for someone to talk to them about why have they been able to do it.
I guess I want to be sensitive here to the comment that Jane made, and that's also on this memo. This isn't anywhere on the utilities work plan right now, and they already found 6 hours of staff time to prepare this memo for us. So I guess I don't want to answer on behalf of the utilities director and assistant director that are here, but I guess I am concerned about protecting utility staff time, and I guess I am concerned also about something that seems innocent. Why not just take a 1-hour meeting and talk with an interesting vendor that's here? But if that's a bridge to nowhere and it's not part of any broader strategy, I guess I worry about how it fits into the broader scheme of things and if we're using scarce resources effectively here.
At some point when everybody thinks it's right, I'd like to talk a little bit about the high-level physics and where we are in the world in terms of how we can capture solar energy. And I can do that now, or
Yeah, let's do it now.
Because I think if we want to attack, however you want to say it, climate change, CO2 emissions, whatever, I think a relatively decent number for solar efficiency, unless you get into concentrated solar, is something like 20%. And when you look at solar thermal, you can get some very high numbers. I've read reports where people are well over 50. I've seen numbers of 80. When you look on the Department of Energy website, they list solar thermal as the best way to reduce CO2 emissions for residential consumption. And I would think that if you have a flat roof area and you need to heat a building or heat water for a building, it would work for businesses as well. The National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, has a fantastic paper that goes into how much of your utility, either power consumption, energy consumption, or cost, you could mitigate if you use solar thermal heating. And they cite aesthetics as a likely reason for not a lot of scale out. But the problem I see is that if our strategy, and I think that Steve's point's a good one, what is the strategy? If we have a strategy of moving toward electrification, we take heating items, water heaters, space heaters, and so forth, and those are often toward the top end of the Pareto of energy consumption for a building. Lighting isn't, heating is. Today they might often be gas-fired. We try to electrify them, and we make your job to go and find renewable resources to drive those electrified needs a bigger job, and the bottlenecking concerns that we've been chatting about become bigger. And so then you want to make those local, but the problem you face is you can't, I think if you run the math, looking at the efficiency delta, you can't get enough solar on the rooftop to heat your house and your water and make up for the energy needs for your house for the full day. Now, the nice thing is if you run a heat pump related device and it's got a tank, you could inventory hot water using the hotter part of the day and give up on turning on all your lights with the solar. But I think when you look at the alternative, where there's a strategy to use solar thermal in a way that actually goes where, maybe it's a group purchase or something like that, I think the physics really support it. And then you don't need to put burden on the the electrical infrastructure that's already taxed. And it's not, of course, you don't get your heat for free. The Department of Energy seems to think it's cost effective. And I've been working on trying to find, I've got some contacts. I'm trying to find the person in the Department of Energy who is their local expert for solar thermal heating. Haven't closed on that yet, but that strikes me as something worth considering. And at least you go through the numbers and you say, you know what, Commissioner Ballantyne has it upside down, and that's not true. PV is more effective, or no, turns out solar thermal is more effective, and if you really want to attack climate change, we need to do it.
So I just want to answer Commissioner Eglash's point in favor of what you're talking about, is that this is very consistent with the whole passive house movement that the city has gotten behind and staff has gotten behind to get involved with. And so I think it's very consistent with that. So it's not asking them to look at something that's completely bizarre or off the
I guess if we're going to try to raise broader questions like physics and overall efficiency and so on, then I wonder if there's an even broader context for this, because we're talking separately about whether we want to reduce natural gas usage in the city or not. We haven't made any decisions. That's certainly a large contribution to our greenhouse gas emissions. It's also a very inexpensive and efficient and convenient way to heat hot water and to do space heating. And so we're going to spend plenty more time over the years ahead figuring out what to do with natural gas and what the importance is of reducing greenhouse gas emissions versus the other benefits of natural gas. That's a huge part of this discussion, because a large number of our domestic hot water heaters are gas-fired hot water heaters. At least anecdotally, part of the problem in the 1980s with solar hot water was, the inconvenience of something starting to leak water on your roof and then leaks into your house. The impact of the weight on roofs that weren't always designed for the weight, and the fact that when you put something like this on your roof, it makes it very more difficult and expensive to replace your shingles when your shingles wear out. So if we're going to push in this direction, and we're going to think about some of the sort of global advantages that the two of my fellow commissioners were just describing, I think we need to look at this broader context as well. We heard earlier this evening about heat pump water heaters. That should be part of the discussion too. I mean, maybe we need a discussion of gas water heaters versus heat pump water heaters versus solar thermal water heaters, so we can take the whole thing in context.
I was going to suggest that, seemed that earlier, that the time for that might be after your pilot project is underway and you're starting to get feedback from your pilot users on the
heat pump
water heater.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my comment overall is we have a program to encourage solar hot water heating systems. And it has not been very successful because it's just not cost effective. If there's some other system that's a great system that somehow people in California don't know about it, well, that's a problem in the market that they need to come and sell it in California, because everyone is required to have this
program.
Yeah, this rebate program. And
well, many of the most thoughtful...
We'd like it to be successful, but it's just too expensive. We can't.
Many of the most thoughtful people I know of that have decided to do this have installed it as a preheating system, and they've kept their gas or electric hot water heater to top it off to whatever temperature they want, but they use this to get most of the way there.
Interesting.
So my commentary perhaps is, I'll really say the layperson in the room, is one that I do think this relates to our earlier discussion on something of the frustration around how topics come forward. And I suspect that the impetus here of the solar hot water heating program is a bit of a tactical report that leads to this larger discussion. And I think that the question really for the commission, and this is really one that needs to be developed in partnership with staff, is how best and in what context to tackle the topic from a work plan perspective. This is certainly not a situation or an environment in which staff has all the answers, and perhaps it is a question whether it be in the context of staff's work plan is developed through an annual budget and how that then happens, and what topics are anticipated there. In particular, right now we're in the discussion on the Sustainability Climate Action Plan and how and where that leads to specific assignments that then perhaps relate to the Utilities Department and Utilities Advisory Commission. So I do really see the need for some organizing around the raising of topics that is clear to me in just a few hours in this conversation hasn't perhaps been given as much attention as it could.
Let me comment on one thing, Ed. It's just as you were speaking, it occurs to me it's worth saying as you enter this period of being the interim director. And remind me, how long have you been with the city of Palo Alto?
9 months.
9 months, and you do not live here, right? So one thing that's very interesting about Palo Alto, in addition to the fact, of course, we are the only city in the state of California that operates all utilities itself, is the population here is very interested in, and has been for decades, in things that renewable energy efficiency, things that reduce global greenhouse gases. And for example, and very notably, our Palo Alto Green Program, the voluntary green power procurement program, was during its time the #1 program in the United States for voluntary green power procurement. Citizens voluntarily saying, I'll pay a little bit more for that sort of thing. When we did this, what do we call the solar share, whatever it was called, sun shares, whatever thing, last year, unless I'm mistaken, I believe residents of the city of Palo Alto participated in that higher than all other cities put together or close to that. We were certainly number one in total, but we were way ahead of everyone else. And so I think to some extent on topics like this commission sort of reflects, it's like push the envelope a little bit because it reflects what the community is interested in. That bounces up against, of course, the staff having limited resources, limited time, and lots of stuff to do. Right. So enough of like you guys pushing on us on this, that, or the other thing. So, it's definitely a good point to think about it, but I do think sort of mulling over how to accomplish this, how to think about solar hot water heating and say, well, gee, it seems to work everywhere else in the world, but it doesn't work here. Is there something we can do about it? And maybe there is no staff time to work on it. Maybe there's a group of UAC commissioners who want to spend some time on it, Brown Act permitting and so on and so forth. So something to think about. Exactly.
Yeah, the only thing that residents like more than being clever is low rates. And so the thing you absolutely cannot do is add another staff person to enable you to be more responsive to all of our requests. Because
I don't agree with
because
that.
So fine, you can disagree in a minute. Let me finish my point. Because, at least once a year, we sit here and compare to three significant figures our rates to PG&E and everyone else within 1,000 miles of here. And, God help us, the pains we go through to explain anywhere where we're not the lowest rate. And so, and that's to not even mention reliability and safety and all the other things that we have to do. And it's only because we've done a good job of controlling costs and achieving high reliability and safety that we even have the luxury of having the discussion we're now having.
I agree with that completely, and that is something that Director Fong would point out many, many times when we'd raise issues
I'm
here.
channeling
and
that.
I appreciate it. Val is thinking fondly of you right now. I'm sure she's watching and saying, "Where's Steve go?"
I'm sure she's not.
So I don't think at any time there's been a suggestion that the City of Palo Alto should hire someone to respond to UAC input or something like that. Having said that, the City of Palo Alto has hired folks over the years to run the kind of programs we're talking about here. And so I think I want to push back a little on this resource issue and be creative and be intelligent about as the City of Palo Alto and CPAU always are on resource allocation.
Well, and maybe in that vein, we should think about the Chief Sustainability Officer and the staff, however, I don't think it's a large staff, but whatever staff the Chief Sustainability Officer has. We often end up talking about and bumping up against City of Palo Alto Utilities work plan.
Sure.
We don't have oversight over the priorities and activities of the Chief Sustainability Officer. I wish we did. But it may well be that some of the things we're talking about here, we or the City Council might believe are a better use of the Chief Sustainability Officer's time than some of the other things that he's doing.
And on that note, I'll try to stay on topic here with the agenda and that make a plug for the Climate Action Plan Summit that will be happening on Sunday, the 25th. 4th, thank you.
I signed up for that.
I hope you all have.
Now, are we
Not as
to all go if we wanted to, or some subset of us allowed to go without it being a Brown Act violation, as long as we don't talk about UAC business?
There's specific sort of public event exceptions to the Brown Act, and if you have any questions about it, I can talk to you in more detail offline. But yeah, you should all feel free to attend.
Before we leave the thread on this, I just wanted to say, in light of sharing information, at a minimum, this is workable. We've done this even before over the last couple of years. I mean, but Commissioner Valentine, if you happen at any point to develop, I'm interested in this topic. I don't have the time to really invest in it, but I would love to, if any commissioner has something like this that they want to forward to the Utilities Director, and then we can, by Brown Act, they can be forwarded to all of us for information only. I think I would really enjoy to read that and maybe studying a little bit into that myself.
I'll forward the NREL paper link so that everyone can have a look at that. It's very nicely written.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is, and obviously you're relatively new to the UAC. In general, we are fairly reactive around here, but if there's a topic of particular interest to you, something like this, that you want to go do some research on and come back with stuff, that would be great. Okay, anything else you want to add on this topic? Thank you. All good? Mm-hmm. Okay, next up, selection of potential topics for discussion at a future UAC meeting. So this is where we're going to discuss this issue of, among other things, how we comment, agendas, or anything else. Mike? Yep.
We did vote on the power purchase agreement.
Yes.
Yes.
We didn't vote, I don't think, on the staff recommendations about the FTTP work plans.
So that one was a discussion item.
Yeah, not a vote.
Okay, not a vote, even though it presented to us as recommendations.
Right. That's an interesting point. Presentation to you. That's an interesting, I'm wondering. I certainly, Mike, you're exactly right. It does say staff recommendations. I'm wondering if that's the mistake.
I think sorry.
Not on the memo.
In the not in the memo, and I think in the context of this was the recommendation that staff had made to council, and so they were simply summarized.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So Ed, you said, hang on, I'm just trying to remember where we were on this issue. Was this, were we going to agendize how we agendize?
Yes.
Okay. Works for me. So we will have a discussion item, I assume, at next month's UAC meeting on this topic. Okay, sounds good. Anything else anyone would like to recommend agendizing?
So I'm going to turn to Commissioner Cook, if I may, and I was about to recite something that I kind of tried to tee up earlier, and that has to do with the undergrounding. However, James, we've got a kind of the two and I have agreed to work on it. One path forward is for you and I to progress with that with staff and learn a little bit more, and maybe some information, and bring that back to the UAC at some point when we have some time in the next few months. That's a path we could do. If there's a broader interest, then we could leapfrog that, and if the commission is interested in progressing with a return to the discussions that apparently happened in 2013, I'd be interested in agendizing that. I'm just going to look to James for guidance on that.
Yeah, my only guidance would be that we would have a little bit of time to get somewhere, you and I, and come back with a recommendation. Then we'll go from there.
So in that case, I'm going to not recommend anything on that right now.
Well, you could agendize it. You could agenda or recommend agendizing it, not for next month, but for some future.
I think we can just yeah, sure. That's right. What we'll do is we'll just give our report during the commissioner meetings portion and our recommendation, and then we can agendize whenever after that.
Okay. Anything else, folks? Okay. Let's see now. Sounds like it's legislative policy guidelines.
So, Chair, I have a personal-related work-related thing that I need to step out for. I didn't realize we'd run out to 10 o'clock.
Wow.
But I do have a 10 o'clock call. But I need to step out and make a call right now. And I think it's probably at a stage where I'll relieve you of the difficulty of splitting up that agenda item. I'll just excuse myself from the meeting at this point.
Very good to see you, Garth.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we are having some technical problems. We were? I've seen that message before.
Here, while we solve technical problems, Debbie, we know you well. We do not know, I don't believe, your colleague to your left. Do you want to do an introduction?
Well, Heather introduced herself, but I'm very happy to introduce Heather Dowler, who's joined me on the utilities compliance and legislative and regulatory side. So Heather will now be managing the legislative and regulatory program for the utilities department.
And you joined the City of Palo Alto on a full-time basis?
Yes.
Great.
Congratulations. Did you say your name again? I just couldn't hear.
Heather Dollar.
Heather, how long have you been with us?
About 3 months.
Great. Where were you before?
Thank you. I was in the private sector working for a healthcare company in a similar role.
Sounds good.
So we all have copies of the slides, so we can proceed without the computer.
There we go. Thank you for pointing out.
It's amazing how resourceful we get at this hour.
We should start at 9 o'clock.
Yes, I
So we have 18 pages of legislative guidance, guidelines, most of them out to buy, in other words. I hope we don't need to review them all in the presentation.
No, so what we've done in the presentation, and for those UAC commissioners who've been through this before, what we do is highlight any substantial changes we've made from previous years. So that's what we're going to do in the presentation, and obviously if you've had a chance to review it, especially if you haven't seen this set of guidelines before and you have questions, you can just point us to anywhere in those guidelines. In the report, we've given you a clean copy of the guidelines, and we're giving you a red line version from the guidelines that were approved last year. Okay. So we were going to split this into the everything but the water utility and the water utility, but now we will put them all together. We will do just a quick review of the 2015 legislative activities, give you some idea of what we're seeing coming for 2016, and then just do a quick review of the substantive changes that we've done in the last policy guidelines.
Great, so if we start off on slide 3, titled Legislative Policy Guidelines, it sets out why we're here asking for these guidelines, and much of the reason why we are here is indicated on the front page of your packet, so I won't belabor that. I'll just note that these are important to us as Debbie and I move forward in the legislative session. Turning to slide 4.
Actually, Heather, it might be worth taking another moment to that. I think we have 3 commissioners that have never been part of legislative guidelines before. So, maybe just the whole concept of how
I
this...
at least read through the memo here. So.
all right, fine. All right, just trying to save us time later.
That's fine. I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Fine.
Thank you.
Last time I'll do that tonight.
Thank you. Page 4 sets out the goals for all utilities. These are the same goals as last year, substantially the same 4 goals that you've seen before in the new commissioners. These are the same goals, so no big changes on this one. On slide 5, this is just to state that when we recommend any new policy guidelines, we're very cognizant that any potential new guidelines have to meet one of those 4 identified goals, which are summarized in the bullet points at the bottom of the slide. And we also recognize that they must support the strategic objectives previously adopted.
Okay, so we'll move on to slide 6 and then very quickly 7. So we had, like I said, we had split this up into 2 parts. So I'll do a little bit of moving around. I think what I'll do is I'll stick with the kind of the energy side, and then we'll look at the changes we've made to those 4, just so we're not flipping back and forth between what we now is our paper presentation package. So slide 7, for us it was the big one of the year. I think it was big most across the state. It was SB 350. That was the attempt to take the governor's what was commonly called his 50-50-50 environmental goals. That was RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, energy efficiency, and then the transportation sector, the increase in efficiency of doubling of fuel efficiency. I don't know if you were listening at the time, but right at the end, towards the end of the session, there was a lot of stuff going on, and they ended up stripping out the whole fuel efficiency bit because they needed the bill to go through, and there was a lot of opposition to that. But what stayed that affects us is the move now that the state's goal is to have a 50% RPS by 2030. Doubling of energy efficiency. We don't know yet how the energy efficiency will affect us, because what the legislation did was basically direct the Energy Commission to come up with how they're going to regulate the utilities and affect this change. Obviously, as we've heard, we've already moved to a 50% RPS, significantly earlier than the state's 2030 goals, so that's not a big impact to us, apart from what it does to the market, of course. Another thing that happened in there that we may be working on this year is they introduced new requirements for integrated resource plans, IRPs. We do IRPs in Palo Alto. We have our LEAP, our long-term electric acquisition plan. Thank you. But what this would be very, very new in that we have to report this and have it reviewed by the Energy Commission. So it's a big extension of the Energy Commission's authority over us.
So do you ever have it where what the Energy Commission is directing you to do differs from what the City Council is asking you to do? Have there been variances?
Well, the Energy Commission has certain authority over us to, it's mostly, we need to report to them on what we're doing with our programs, and then they have authority to fine us if we're not meeting kind of the state standards. So yes, the state standards may at times vary from what the council would want to do.
And so that gets reconciled by you telling the council, well, we have to do this for the state.
We have to do this. We have no choice. And then the other big bill that got passed last year was AB 802. This is about benchmarking of buildings. So we already have a requirement to record or save the energy usage of our customers and report certain building usage data to the Energy Star portfolio manager. This really expands the amount of buildings and the requirement to report. We have some concerns with it because of data customer confidentiality, and also it's really expanding our reporting requirement, something that we do not have automated yet, so it's going to take a lot of resources. So looking ahead, going on to slide 9, greenhouse gas emission reduction. The state's now looking to
Actually,
move
I'm sorry,
beyond.
David, let me just back up for 1 second. On that last point on the building, on the benchmark, Palo Alto working with NCPA to address privacy concerns. What privacy concerns do we have there?
So the AB 802 requires that building data be uploaded and made public, basically.
And
so
why do we care? In other words, if the state decides to do that, why do we have a horse in that particular fight?
We've taken a position about protecting our customer confidentiality
Now,
because of the.
I wasn't on the commission when we discussed that. I would take a different view on that point.
Yeah, I would also take a different view on that. So I would tend to say that I do not think Palo Alto should work with NCPA. I would leave that to the state legislature. I don't think Palo Alto has a... If anything, I would have Palo Alto advocate in reducing privacy. Privacy, from what I've heard in benchmarking, is just a hindrance to it, and so...
So to present a different point of view on that, as I read through the redlined copy, there are actually a couple of places where you talk about wanting to protect privacy and confidentiality, and my reaction was that that's in fact a good thing, and that there may be cases where we're talking about data about commercial buildings as opposed to residential homeowners where maybe the privacy issue is overblown. But I guess I would be concerned about us making broad comments. I'm concerned that as we move into a more connected world and smart meters and so on, there are genuine privacy concerns for people living in Palo Alto, and so I was happy to see red line revisions adding increased concern for privacy and confidentiality. For example, it's possible to know from someone's energy usage patterns whether they're at home or whether the home is empty. And part of protecting privacy concerns is to make sure that the right kinds of encryption policies are in place so that someone hacking data in the cloud can't figure out what homes are empty.
But I think this is more, since we're one of the only utilities in the state that doesn't have smart meters, you for these kind of reports, you want aggregated, anonymized data. You're not They're not
Right.
looking at individual homes.
It's
They're
Steve's
looking
home
at,
versus
they're-
my
these are
home, right, right.
consolidated kinds of things for reports. And so it actually would make it more private if you had the automation, because then you could do the aggregation without having to know, exactly, did you get this house, this house, this house, or this building, this building, this building? You could sort of do it in a more automated fashion.
Right, but I think the question in front of us is that staff has proposed some legislative guidelines that include a couple of statements about protecting privacy and confidentiality, and we just heard two commissioners say they should back off from that.
I said it with respect to AB 802.
Exactly. So that was the nuance that I was
Of course.
trying to bring up.
So I guess I would say I've seen utilities and people in the utility sector in general reflexively say privacy, privacy, privacy on energy usage data, and that can be a problem for benchmarking. So I just say, when I see us, if we are falling into that, privacy must protect all privacy at all times, I say it's worth a discussion. All right, let's carry on.
So we were on slide 9, and that was, we're expecting to see legislation continuing to kind of codify the post-2020 greenhouse gas reduction goals. So this is kind of going beyond the AP 32 and CARB's current role in that, and formalizing how we would get to the 2050 goals. There's the net energy metering 2.0.
So could you elaborate on net energy metering? Because I noticed on looking at the legislative guidelines that we've added a new bullet that reads, net energy metering successor, advocate for legislative or regulations that provide local accountability for design of net energy metering successor programs designed to fit local conditions and priorities. Have we as a city decided that we want to support the continuing of net energy metering or the transition away from it?
I believe that is, you've taken the guidelines for
Yeah, we
that
took
program?
the design guidelines to the commission a few months ago.
Right.
And you recommended that, this is for the NEM successor program. And you recommended a set of guidelines that went then to the Finance Committee and were just approved by Council Monday.
Perfect.
And so we are recommending, and we are designing right now, an NEM successor program under those guidelines.
Great. So thanks for reminding us of that and updating us of the status of the City Council having approved that. So in that context, the legislative guideline is just saying staff can go ahead and try to push for whatever it is that we've just approved up the chain through City Council. Right? You're not trying to state a position on net energy metering here. You're just trying to say we believe we support legislation and regulations that allow for flexibility based on local conditions. That's what we're saying.
Yes. Local, yeah.
And so we would use that flexibility, or we would apply or interpret that in the case of Palo Alto to argue for perhaps our particular net energy metering successor program. Okay. So there's a sense in which this is agnostic. There's a sense in which the legislative guideline on net energy metering is agnostic, and the actual net energy metering successor program is the separate issue that the assistant director just described.
I mean, the guide, so for the legislative guideline is that we would be supporting, encouraging legislation that, or lack thereof, that leaves the authority for designing the program with the local authority.
Right. Right, where the state, for example, doesn't impose
A specific
a
design.
uniform NEM successor policy on all utilities.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And if a few years from now someone says, "Oh, look, we have this patchwork of laws," then we'll deal with that then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You've got it.
Thank you, Catherine.
You are an IT god.
Just needed Dave's magic password.
Okay, so and then just kind of general some energy related issues we see coming in 2016. B, increased demand response goals, energy efficiency. Left over from last year, there were proposals to change power content label requirements, which we weren't particularly happy with because it didn't give us any credit for our carbon neutral portfolio. There was a natural gas renewable standard that was proposed last year that might come back again. And there was, as we mentioned, customer disclosure bills on the table.
Oh, we have it.
We did? There we go. Okay. Do you know Western policy issues? A big deal for us because of our large hydro interest. We have continuing interest there in trying to control the cost allocations that are made to the power customers. And although 2025 may seem a long way out, they have actually started their the process of the 2025 power marketing plan, which we're going to be involved in, or at least Jane's group is.
So our current contract expires in 2024.
And it will take this long, right? 10 years?
Did last time.
On federal legislative issues, some things don't change very much. They're continuing to look at cybersecurity issues, obviously the grid reliability and how the FERC, the federal agency, and the regional reliability organizations work to set the standards for us. There was the federal EPA emission standards that was passed. The general thought is that that's not really going to impact California, just because California has a much more aggressive goals in any case. But we will be watching that one. As always, budget and tax reform can impact utility financing operations and customer data security as well. Obviously, I think that's generally in every arena. People are aware of the security of customer data. Over to
So here are some of the suggested guideline modifications that we're asking consideration for. The first slide is changes for all the utilities, and you'll note under reworded goals 1 and 3 that we simply really struck out language in goal 1 and plugged it into goal 3 where it seemed to make a little more sense. And then in augmented goal 2, we added the words security and data to demonstrate the importance of our efforts surrounding these areas.
So if we go back to that one, so you view, I did sort of see the eliminating the reference to while balancing statewide climate protection goals. So you view that as simply a wordsmithing thing because you've moved it from 1 to 3, not in any way substantive?
That's right. Since 3 was already talking about GHG, so it kind of made sense that that sentence that was in 1 would be plugged into the GHG since it was regarding climate, whereas where it was in 1,
right. So here, I'll say one thing about this, and then we can move on, and it's fine. But 3 is supportive of GHG emissions. That's good. So the language and support statewide climate protection goals is almost superfluous there. It's like, well, of course it does. Whereas in number 1, that's really talking about something else, preserve local accountability and control and oversight, but while also balancing statewide climate protection goals. I actually think it's more substantive, it has more impact in number 1. Bottom line, I'm fine.
I actually agree with you.
Yeah. Do you understand that point? In number 3, it's almost like, oh yeah, and by the way, it supports statewide climate goals. It's just something to think about, but anyway.
I agree.
Now, you also deleted language in 2 that said support legislation that will result in the most cost-effective reduction of GHG emissions.
Number 3.
No, number 2 is what you deleted.
It's not noted on the slide, but it's in the memo.
And so I wasn't, I guess, again, probably motherhood, you're going to be doing that anyway, to say cost effectively reducing GHG.
I was saying it's more apple pie.
Yeah.
sorry, you said we struck language in goal 2?
Goal 2, it's a support legislation. This
Which
is
page are you looking on?
Attachment B, page 1.
Page 1. I don't remember off the top of my head, this went through a few iterations. It could be that we wanted to be a little more broad in this particular one. We do still capture the GHG language, for example, here on the slide. And so perhaps we took this opportunity to edit and clean up.
Okay.
So to the extent...
It wasn't intended to be a policy change, just
no.
wordsmith.
No, and to the extent that you feel that it was, we're certainly willing to add some verbiage back in.
That's all right. I wondered.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So slide 14, just continuing on the all utilities, we did suggest 3 new guidelines. The first is, again, to note our commitment towards keeping customer information private, as there's been some discussion on. Number 12 seeks outside funding when we can to help support the infrastructure to do that. And number 11 sets out our commitment to reforming Prop 26 to allow for less fee constraints.
So let me say the following. I do, this is just my personal opinion, but I think there may be some support for this. I do think that when it comes to keeping customer data private, clearly we should keep Steve's customer data private. No, I'm joking. But in other words, residential customer identified by name, I'm fine with keeping that private. I don't think there's much controversy over that. I doubt anyone's pushing the other way. But if it comes to anonymized data, collectivized data, commercial data, I don't particularly see why we should be pushing.
Actually, there are companies out there that try to, like I know one that drives down the street and tries to, with infrared, assess your building envelope. They'd like to be able to match that to utility records, get a more accurate energy audit of that particular facility, and then, it'd be intrude on privacy, but it's valuable data for people that sell new roofs or insulation or double
So you're saying, so you would disagree with my exception? In other words,
I think we should recognize there are a lot of beneficial uses from making some of that kind of data available. I wouldn't want it in real time, when somebody's on vacation or that sort of thing. But
interesting.
But don't you think it's like if the homeowner gives permission to have the third party see their data for their house, that's completely reasonable. To just let somebody do prospecting and mining on their own without the permission of the customer, I think that would.
I think it gets probably monthly data or something. I'd rather see something that I don't think confidentiality is always a good. I think there's a balance.
I agree with that.
For example, I would publicize the names of the high water users, but I'm a minority on that. So I don't want us to go overboard on that, and recognize there are programs and companies and ideas out there that use building energy data for good uses.
So can I say that the purpose for number 8 was not about utility usage data, it was about private customer data like credit card information and personal data. This is more a broader, like everyone.
Different definition of data.
Trying to stop.
So security versus privacy.
And that's the standard. I mean, that's the industry standard that nobody gives out their customer information in terms of your specifics of who you are, and which is completely independent of usage data usage patterns that you're trying to analyze for other purposes. Those are completely separate things.
That's right, but even on the latter one, I think, while we've clearly heard from a couple of commissioners who think that data ought to be more widely available because there's good things that can be done with it. Right, and I guess I want to point out that I suspect there's a lot of people in this city that think that the amount of gas and electricity they use in a given month or year should just be between them and the utility and should be protected the same way their credit card information and their salaries and their HIV status are protected.
But if you get an OPOW report, the fact that it's doing a relative thing, I mean, in the aggregate, it's not.
Here's an example that fits what Steve's driving at. Let's say we're in the data center business, as many people in this area are. It could be trade secret information, exactly how much power we need to do a certain amount of compute work. And you might not want your competitor down the block to know that you just made a breakthrough and figured out how to do it for less power, or that you're lagging behind the problem and you're requiring more power, right?
Yeah, but how are you going to know that from just somebody's total usage? You're not going to know whether they kept the lights on more or they had some process breakthroughs.
They don't even have lights. Those things are dark. They just have racks of servers, right? So their power bill is everything.
But why would that be? You wouldn't give it to another business? You know, you
I'm
wouldn't
just talking
say,
about the
Joe
privacy
down the
of it.
street, I want to know what his building usage is. Why would you do that? You wouldn't do that.
Well, some of the requirements would have that information being publicly available. So it's not that.
This is from the state saying they want to have.
Yes.
Right, so again, we're discussing legislative guidelines, and granted, this one was about personal information like credit card information, so, you know, we should all be saying never mind and moving on here, I suppose. But clearly there's a diversity of opinion on the commission as to how hard we should work to protect usage data, and you know, so I don't know if there are legislative guidelines relating to that kind of confidentiality and privacy or not, but I guess we've heard a diversity of opinion too.
Right, and you're right, Steve, that is one of the things that's been part of the whole, you know, customer discussions in the whole smart grid arena, is that you do have people who are much more sensitive about their data being visible and under what circumstances than others. And any good program will allow you to have a portfolio approach so you can let people sign up for the kinds of programs that reflect that.
So hold on, we're so far over time here, it's absurd. How much more time is in your presentation if we didn't interrupt you at all?
8 minutes.
Are there other, I'm just trying to remember when I read the memo, are there others, well, you probably don't know what's controversial because you probably didn't expect this was controversial. Do you want to let this 8 minutes go, or you want to make your motion?
I don't want to let, my personal opinion is I don't want to let the 8 minutes go. I appreciate the memo and the presentation we've had so far, but I would move to accept the staff's recommendation as it's written on the, I think it's one of the last slides, slide 30.
There's two. We
can
split them, but we can.
I would go with both as they're written, and the only changes I'd reverse the changes on slide 13, as noted in Chair Foster's comment a little bit earlier. So I would just eliminate the changes on slide 13 as they relate to the rewording of goals 1 and 3.
Yes. Did you also want to put the GHG language back into number 2?
I didn't.
No, I'm fine. I would leave it in there.
Okay,
we're aligned.
So just strictly
the changes in 1 and 3. Stick with what we had.
Move the climate change comment from 1 to 3.
Okay,
you want to move it back to 1.
So data privacy stuff.
So I would second that motion.
Okay.
Hold on a second. We have to have a little discussion. We have to have a little discussion. So
I won't propose any further changes.
I think what's going to happen is, as we get into the development of programs and places where the data is available, then we'll be able to have the specific discussions. And the fact that we're being sensitive to the privacy issues will give us enough of an umbrella that then we can get into the specifics.
Yes. None of this drives internal policy. These are legislative guidelines.
Well, yes, but the point is, they will then go, the city of Palo Alto, based on this, will advocate one way or the other at the state level.
I've got to tell you, everybody, the privacy thing is so far ahead of us. People are in the legislative conversations that happen and the regulatory conversations at the CPUC and other regulatory bodies. Everybody knows you have to have data privacy is an important thing. I don't think our people are going to add anything to it in any meaningful way that it matters.
So you say don't sweat it?
This is a big issue. This is one of those like mega issues. People know you have to keep the customer's data private. We're not going to be the outlier.
Right. My inclination is I don't particularly think Palo Alto needs to be getting into this fight and advocating one way or the other. But whatever.
Yeah, I think we're okay with the language.
Whatever. Okay, hang on. Are there other things, is there anything else controversial
Let me scan this one.
before we all vote on this?
Of course, you have a conflict of interest, Heather, in pointing.
No.
I don't.
No, it's all great.
Not to Heather, it is.
This is the most finely crafted legislative guidelines
Expected a
ever
rubber
in the
stamp,
history of the
Let me think.
Or, and I read this memo 4 days ago, so I'm not, at 10:30 at night, I'm not remembering all the details. Does anyone else have anything? Want to circle anything?
And on page.
There were some check marks I would have put in or taken it, but I'm fine. It's
All right.
like I'm not gonna worry about it.
We got, just brought up these for, under the electric utility. So last year we were concentrating, I mean, we still had the support for the 33%. Obviously that's just, we're at 50% now, so we're just taking that out. We thought there was an increase coming, and we were with a coalition of other utilities that was trying to get something that's called a clean energy standard. So instead of having RPS and greenhouse gas reductions, two different things, just tell us what you need to do and then let us design our portfolio. That didn't go anywhere, so we're taking it out. The thing that we're really going to, I think, want to hone in on is to try and prevent them having source-specific or technology-specific carve-outs. So that's going to, I think, be our focus. And then just regarding the Western base resource capacity, again, because we're negotiating the 2025 marketing plan, so there may be some issues there, Jane.
And Debbie, why would we object to source-specific carve-outs?
The state telling us that we have to have 20% geothermal in our portfolio versus 50% renewable portfolio standard, 50% you go out and you decide whether you're going to have geothermal, solar, wind, or whatever mix of all of the above.
Okay, fine. Any other discussion on this? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thanks very much. Welcome to the team.
Thanks for staying on.
Right, so again, we did, it was not the staff recommendation we approved.
It was the staff recommendation with a minor adjustment.
Putting back.
We'll have to capture that.
And I appreciate your intestinal fortitude.
Well, the advantage of going last is you get less.
Well, hold on. Wait, don't we have drought? Mike, hold on, we got drought.
One more.
Yes.
We got drought.
Oh, did you have a presentation?
Yeah, there's somewhere.
Let me hear.
Whose desktop is this?
I know.
This is Dave's.
It's a mess.
Embarrassingly, mine has more on the.
We always do.
Exactly.
Do you want me to drive for you, Jane?
Sure, I think there's only 4 slides.
How much do you worry about?
Okay, so I'm going to go quickly through this. This is your monthly update on the drought. Here's just a review since the 2015 is now over. You can kind of look where our monthly usage is for 2013, which was established as a baseline, and then 2014, 2015. So you can see quite a bit of savings. In 2015, there's savings total for the calendar year was 28%, below 2013 usage. And then, of course, the compliance period we had with the state to achieve a 24% savings is from June 1st, 2015 through the end of February 2016. And so we're already far above our total savings goal for that period. We're currently at about 33% total savings for the period. So we feel like unless we just backslide a gigantic amount and start using way more than 2013 from now to the end of the year, that we will meet that 24% overall goal. And this is a picture of the entire regional water system of San Francisco, what they used in 2013, 2014, and 2015, which is the red line. And the dotted line shows the aggregate for all of the wholesale customers of San Francisco and the city and county of San Francisco. And what you'll note is, as a group, we're far below the state mandate. And the bad news for this is, and I'm giving you a heads up for next month's UAC meeting, when we're going to talk about the preliminary financial plans, because this use is so low, you can guess what's happening. The San Francisco first told us that they expected next year's wholesale water rate increase. What they told us last year, it would increase by about 3%. It's probably closer to 20, it could be 30% wholesale rate increase.
Wow.
So we're expecting a higher, and then the same problem with our own system. That's the consequence of saving lots of water. So you will see a higher rate increase projections than you saw in last year's financial plans. And that's for water, and that's actually for everything, because the drought has affected all the funds.
So I just want to say that, I think that the thing that's going to be is a communication issue, and that if there's any way we can give support to you on that, I think is going to be really important, because I know at eWeb, they had this whole thing just blow up on them because Bonneville Power increased their rates, so they had to pass it along, and it's causing this whole hoo-ha. And so since we know that it's going to be an issue, it's worth, if there's anything we can do to support it.
But remember, for this piece of it, the bills aren't going up. The rates are going up, and the bills aren't going up. Because the usage is down.
Right, but next year it's going to be an additional.
Well, the bills are going up because of other trends, but the portion of the rate increase due to reduced usage doesn't result in a higher bill. It results in a higher rate.
Although, excellent point. Maybe the more advanced notice people get in Palo weekly or whatever, that rates going up. It'll be old news by the time it happens.
If you bought exactly the same amount of water and you didn't actually have any reduction,
You'd have a big increase in your
you'd have
bill.
a big increase in your bill.
Right.
Right, but
Yep.
no one is buying the same amount of water. People are using.
Well, there are
less.
probably some people,
That's
some people are.
Yeah, some
but,
people are.
Yeah, those people will pay a
Those
lot
people
more.
will pay a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a communication.
It is.
We know it's going to be a communication issue.
Yeah.
Of how it's explained.
Yeah, you got
And-
the experts sitting behind you. So.
And then
Jane,
I think
I have the impression, listening to reports as we get into what will hopefully be a normal rainy season, that some of the state's smaller reservoirs actually can fill up in one winter, but some of the state's larger reservoirs like Shasta cannot fill up in even one normal rainy season. Can you comment a little bit on sort of how things play out over the next few years if we start having normal rainy seasons?
Well, I don't think a normal rainy season is going to fill up a large reservoir like Shasta.
Right, because it's so low now, yeah.
It's so low, and it's so many years of low precipitation and runoff
Yeah, that's the
that it would
impression I
have
have,
to
too.
be, a magnificent year to get up to something.
Whereas some of the
towards
smaller
normal.
reservoirs, like south of San Jose, those I think can fill up sort of anytime you get a decent precipitation.
And all the systems are different, and they're connected differently, and water gets moved around. So, and then this is the last slide we have that again shows the impacts of the drought on the water, on the electric utility, because of course we get a lot less of the hydropower. We pay actually a little bit more for it, and then we have to buy a bunch of replacement power from the market. And then because also we want to be carbon neutral, we also buy RECs for all that extra market energy that we had to buy, so costing us even more in the drought.
To the question I was just asking about dams, about reservoirs filling up, do you know how quickly this recovers when we start having normal winters? Does this recover immediately, or does this also take years to recover?
Well, Shasta is part of the
That's
Central
what I
Valley
think. So
project.
Shasta's part of this.
Right, so that's
This is
not a water
flowing
supply
out
for
of
us.
Shasta.
This is.
So this one might
this
take
is
years
electric.
to recover also.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Okay. Any questions on the drought update?
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for their marathon contribution.
Okay, that's it, folks. We're adjourned. See you all next month. Thanks.
Good job as your first.
Officers.
First.
No, the one that's-
Good job, Zero. Thank you.